The Tale of al-Zaman. There was in times of yore and in ages long gone before a king called Shahriman, who was lord of many troops and guards and officers, and who reigned over certain islands known as the Khalidan Islands, on the borders of the land of the Persians. But he was stricken in years, and his bones were wasted, without having been blessed with a son, albeit he had 4 wives, daughters of kings, and 60 concubines, with each of whom he was wont to lie one night in turn. This preyed upon his mind and disquieted him, so that he complained thereof to one of his wazirs, saying, "Verily I fear lest my kingdom be lost when I die, for that I have no son to succeed me." The minister answered, "O king, peradventure Allah shall yet bring something to pass, so rely upon the Almighty and be instant in prayer. It is also my counsel that thou spread a banquet and invite to it the poor and needy, and let them eat of thy food, and supplicate the Lord to vouchsafe thee a son. For perchance there may be among thy guests a righteous soul whose prayers find acceptance, and thereby thou shalt win thy wish." So the king rose, made the lesser ablution, and prayed a 2-bow prayer. Then he cried upon Allah with pure intention, after which he called his chief wife to bed and lay with her forthright. By the grace of God she conceived, and, when her months were accomplished, she bore a male child, like the moon on the night of fullness. The king named him Qamr al-Zaman, and rejoiced in him with extreme joy, and bade the city be dressed out in his honor. So they decorated the streets 7 days, whilst the drums beat and the messengers bore the glad tidings abroad. Then wet and dry nurses were provided for the boy, and he was reared in splendor and delight, until he reached the age of 15. He grew up of surpassing beauty and seemlihead and symmetry, and his father loved him so dear that he could not brook to be parted from him day or night. One day he complained to a certain of his ministers anent the excess of his love for his only child, saying, "O thou the wazir, of a truth I fear for my son, Qamr al-Zaman, the shifts and accidents which befall man, and fain would I marry him in my lifetime." Answered the wazir, "O king, know thou that marriage is one of the most honorable of moral actions, and thou wouldst indeed do well and right to marry thy son in thy lifetime, ere thou make him sultan." On this quoth the king, "Hither with my son Qamr al-Zaman." So he came and bowed his head to the ground in modesty before his sire. "O Qamr al-Zaman," said King Shahriman, "of a truth I desire to marry thee and rejoice in thee during my lifetime." Replied he, "O my father, know that I have no lust to marry, nor doth my soul incline to women, for that concerning their craft and perfidy I have read many books and heard much talk, even as saith the poet. Now an of women ask ye, I reply, in their affairs I'm versed a doctor rare. When man's head grizzles and his money dwindles, in their affections he hath naught for share." And another said, "Rebel against women, and so shalt thou serve Allah the more. The youth who gives women the rein must forfeit all hope to soar. They'll balk him when seeking the strange device, excelsior, though waste he 1,000 of years in the study of science and lore." And when he had ended his verses, he continued, "O my father, wedlock is a thing whereto I will never consent, no, not though I drink the cup of death." When Sultan Shahriman heard these words from his son, light became darkness in his sight, and he grieved thereat with great grief. Yet, for the great love he bore him, he was unwilling to repeat his wishes, and was not wroth with him, but caressed him and spake him fair, and showed him all manner of kindness, such as tendeth to induce affection. All this, and Qamr al-Zaman increased daily in beauty and loveliness and amorous grace. And the king bore with him for a whole year till he became perfect in eloquence and elegant wit. All men were ravished with his charms, and every breeze that blew bore the tidings of his gracious favour. His fair sight was a seduction to the loving and a garden of delight to the longing, for he was honey-sweet of speech, and the sheen of his face shamed the full moon. He was a model of symmetry and blandishment and engaging ways. His shape was the willow wand or the rattan cane, and his cheeks might take the place of rose or red anemone. He was, in fine, the pink of perfection, even as the poet hath said of him. He came, and cried they, "Now be Allah blessed! Praise him that clad that soul in so fair vest! He's king of beauty where the beauteous be, all are his riots, all obey his hest. His lip dew's sweeter than the virgin honey, his teeth are pearls in double row close pressed. All charms are congregate in him alone, and deals his loveliness to man unrest. Beauty wrote on those cheeks for worlds to see, I testify there is none good but he. When the year came to an end, the king called his son to him and said,
O my son, wilt thou not hearken to me?
Whereupon Kamar al-Zaman fell down for respect and shame before his sire, and replied, O my father, how should I not hearken to thee, seeing that Allah commandeth me to obey thee and not gainsay thee? Rejoined King Shahriman,
O my son, know that I desire to marry thee and rejoice in thee whilst yet I live, and make thee king over my realm before my death.
When the prince heard his sire pronounce these words, he bowed his head awhile, then raised it and said, O my father, this is a thing which I will never do. No, not though I drink the cup of death. I know of a surety that the Almighty hath made obedience to thee a duty and religion, but, Allah upon thee, press me not in this matter of marriage, nor fancy that I will ever marry my life long, for that I have read the books both of the ancients and the moderns, and have come to know all the mischiefs and miseries which have befallen them through women and their endless artifices. And how excellent is the saying of the poet, He whom the randy mots entrap shall never see deliverance. Though build he forts 1,000-fold, whose mighty strength lead plates enhance, their force shall be of no avail, these fortresses have not a chance. Women aye deal in treachery, to far and near o'er earth's expanse. With fingers dipped in henna blood, and locks in braids that mad the glance, and eyelids painted o'er with kohl, they gar us drink of dire mischance. And how excellently saith another, Women, for all the chastity they claim, are awful cast by kites where'er they list. This night their talk and secret charms are thine, that night another joyeth calf and wrist. Like inn, whence after night thou farest at dawn, and lodges other wight thou hast not wist. Now when King Shahriman heard these his son's words, and learnt the import of his verses and poetical quotations, he made no answer of his excessive love for him, but redoubled in graciousness and kindness to him. He at once broke up the audience, and, as soon as the séance was over, he summoned his minister, and, taking him apart, said to him,
O thou the wazir, tell me how I shall deal with my son in the matter of marriage. Of a truth I took counsel with thee thereon, and thou didst counsel me to marry him before making him king. I have spoken with him of wedlock time after time, and he still gainsaid me. So do thou, O wazir, forthright advise me what to do.
Answered the minister, O king, wait another year, and, if after that thou be minded to speak to him on the matter of marriage, speak not to him privily, but address him on a day of state, when all the emirs and wazirs are present, with the whole of the army standing before thee. And when all are in crowd, then send for thy son Kamar al-Zaman, and summon him, and, when he cometh, broach to him the matter of marriage before the wazirs and grandees and officers of the state and captains. For he will surely be bashful and daunted by their presence, and will not dare to oppose thy will. Now when King Shahriman heard his wazir's words, he rejoiced with exceeding joy, seeing success in the project, and bestowed on him a splendid robe of honour. Then he took patience with his son another year, whilst, with every day that passed over him, Kamar al-Zaman increased in beauty and loveliness, and elegance and perfect grace, till he was nigh 20 years old. Indeed, Allah had clad him in the cloak of comeliness, and had crowned him with the crown of completion. His eye-glance was more bewitching than Harut and Marut, and the play of his luring looks more misleading than Taghut, and his cheeks shone like the dawn rosy red, and his eyelashes stormed the keen-edged blade. The whiteness of his brow resembled the moon shining bright, and the blackness of his locks was as the murky night. And his waist was more slender than the gossamer, and his back parts than 2 sand-heaps bulkier, making a babble of the heart with their softness. But his waist complained of the weight of his hips and loins, and his charms ravished all mankind, even as one of the poets saith in these couplets, By his eyelash tendril curled, by his slender waist I swear, by the dart his witchery feathers, fatal hurtling through the air, by the just roundness of his shape, by his glances bright and keen, by the swart limning of his locks, and his fair forehead shining sheen, by his eyebrows which deny that she who looks on them should sleep, which, now commanding, now forbidding, o'er me high dominion keep, By the roses of his cheek, his face is fresh as myrtle wreath, his tulip lips, and those pure pearls that hold the places of his teeth. By his noble form, which rises featly turned in even swell, to where upon his jutting chest 2 young pomegranates seem to dwell. By his supple moving hips, his taper waist and silky skin, by all he robbed perfection of, and holds enchained his form within. By his tongue of steadfastness, his nature true and excellent, by the greatness of his rank, his noble birth and high descent. Musk from my love her savour steals, who musk exhales from every limb, and all the air's ambergris breathes are but the zephyrs blow o'er him. The sun, methinks, the broad bright sun, as low before my love should quail, as would my love himself transcend the paltry paring of his nail. So King Shahriman, having accepted the counsel of his wazir, waited for another year and a great festival, a day of state when the audience hall was filled with emirs and wazirs and grandees of his reign and officers of the state and captains of might and main. Thereupon he sent for his son Qamr al-Zaman, who came, and, kissing the ground before him 3 times, stood in presence of his sire with his hands behind his back, the right grasping the left. Then said the king to him,
Know, O my son, that I have not sent for thee on this occasion, and summoned thee to appear before this assembly, and all these officers of a state here awaiting our orders, save and except that I may lay a commandment on thee, wherein do thou not disobey me. And my commandment is that thou marry, for I am minded to wed thee to a king's daughter, and rejoice in thee ere I die.
When the prince heard this much from his royal sire, he bowed his head groundwards awhile. Then, raising it towards his father, and being moved thereto at that time by youthful folly and boyish ignorance, replied, But for myself I will never marry, no, not though I drink the cup of death. As for thee, thou art great in age and small of wit. Hast thou not, twice ere this day and before this occasion, questioned me of the matter of marriage, and I refused my consent? Indeed, thou dotest, and are not fit to govern a flock of sheep. So saying, Qamr al-Zaman unclasped his hands from behind his back, and tucked up his sleeves above his elbows before his father, being in a fit of fury. Moreover, he added many words to his sire, knowing not what he had said in the trouble of his spirits. The king was confounded and ashamed, for that this befell in the presence of his grandees and soldier officers assembled on a high festival and a state occasion. But presently the majesty of kingship took him, and he cried out at his son and made him tremble. Then he called to the guards standing before him and said,
Seize him!
So they came forward and laid hands on him, and, binding him, brought him before his sire, who bade them pinion his elbows behind his back, and in this guise make him stand before the presence. And the prince bowed down his head for fear and apprehension, and his brow and face were beaded and spangled with sweat, and shame and confusion troubled him sorely. Thereupon his father abused him and reviled him, and cried,
Woe to thee, thou son of adultery and nursling of abomination! How durst thou answer me on this wise before my captains and soldiers? But hitherto none hath chastised thee. Knowest thou not that this deed thou hast done were a disgrace to him had it been done by the meanest of my subjects?
And the king commanded his Mamelukes to loose his elbow bonds and imprison him in one of the bastions of the citadel. So they took the prince and thrust him into an old tower, wherein there was a dilapidated saloon and in its middle a ruined well, after having first swept it and cleansed its floor flags and set therein a couch on which they laid a mattress, a leathern rug, and a cushion. And then they brought a great lantern and a wax candle, for that place was dark even by day. And lastly the Mamelukes led Qamr al-Zaman thither and stationed a eunuch at the door. And when all this was done, the prince threw himself on the couch, sad-spirited and heavy-hearted, blaming himself and repenting of his injurious conduct to his father, whenas repentance availed him naught, and saying, Allah curse marriage and marriageables and married women, the traitoresses all! Would I had hearkened to my father and accepted a wife! Had I so done, it had been better for me than this jail. This is how it fared with him, but as regards King Shahriman, he remained seated on his throne all through the day until sundown. Then he took the minister apart and said to him,
Know thou, O wazir, that thou and thou only wast the cause of all this that hath come to pass between me and my son, by the advice thou wast pleased to devise? And so what dost thou counsel me to do now?
Answered he, O king, leave thy son in limbo for the space of 15 days. Then summon him to thy presence and bid him wed, and assuredly he shall not gainsay thee again. The king accepted the wazir's opinion, and lay down to sleep that night troubled at heart concerning his son, for he loved him with dearest love because he had no other child but this, and it was his wont every night not to sleep save after placing his arm under his son's neck. So he passed that night in trouble and unease on the prince's account, tossing from side to side, as he were laid on coals of artemisia wood. For he was overcome with doubts and fears, and sleep visited him not all that livelong night. But his eyes ran over with tears, and he began repeating,
While slanderers slumber, longsome is my night. Suffice thee a heart so sad in parting plight. I say, while night in care slow moments by, what, no return for thee, fair morning light?
And the saying of another,
When saw I Pleiad stars his glance escape, and Polestar draught of sleep upon him pour, and the beer daughters wend in mourning dight, I knew that morning was for him no more.
Such was the case with King Shahriman, but as regards Qamr al-Zaman, when the night came upon him, the eunuch set the lantern before him, and, lighting the wax candle, placed it in the candlestick, then brought him somewhat of food. The prince ate a little, and continually reproached himself for his unseemly treatment of his father, saying to himself, O my soul, knowest thou not that a son of Adam is the hostage of his tongue, and that a man's tongue is what casteth him into deadly perils? Then his eyes ran over with tears, and he bewailed that which he had done, from anguished vitals and aching heart, repenting him with exceeding repentance of the wrong wherewith he had wronged his father, and repeating, Fair youth shall die by stumbling of the tongue. Stumble of foot works not man's life such wrong. The slip of lip shall oft smite off the head, while slip of foot shall never harm one long. Now when he had made an end of eating, he asked for the wherewithal to wash his hands, and when the Mameluke had washed them clean of the remnants of food, he arose and made the wuzu ablution, and prayed the prayers of sundown and nightfall, conjoining them in one. After which he sat down on the well and began reciting the Koran, and he repeated, The cow, the house of Imran, and YS, the compassionate, blessed be the king, unity, and the two talismans. And he ended with blessing and supplication, and with saying, I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the stoned. Then he lay down upon his couch, which was covered with a mattress of satin from al-Ma'adin town, the same on both sides, and stuffed with the raw silk of Iraq. And under his head was a pillow filled with ostrich down. And when ready for sleep, he doffed his outer clothes, and drew off his bag trousers, and lay down in a shirt of delicate stuff smooth as wax. And he donned a head kerchief of azure marazi cloth. And at such time and on this guise, Qamr al-Zaman was like the full-orbed moon, when it riseth on its 14th night. Then, drawing over his head a coverlet of silk, he fell asleep with the lantern burning at his feet and the wax candle over his head, and he ceased not sleeping through the first third of the night, not knowing what lurked for him in the womb of the future, and what the Omniscient had decreed for him. Now, as fate and fortune would have it, both tower and saloon were old, and had been many years deserted, and there was therein a Roman well inhabited by a genii of the seed of Iblis the accursed, by name Maymuna, daughter of al-Dimiryat, a renowned king of the Jinn. And as Qamr al-Zaman continued sleeping till the first third of the night, Maymuna came up out of the Roman well and made for the firmament, thinking to listen by stealth to the converse of the angels. But when she reached the mouth of the well, she saw a light shining in the tower, contrary to custom. And having dwelt there many years without seeing the like, she said to herself, Never have I witnessed aught like this, and, marvelling much at the matter, determined that there must be some cause therefore. So she made for the light and found the eunuch sleeping within the door, and inside she saw a couch spread, whereon was a human form with the wax candle burning at his head and the lantern at his feet, and she wondered to see the light, and stole towards it little by little. Then she folded her wings and stood by the bed, and, drawing back the coverlid, discovered Qamr al-Zaman's face. She was motionless for a full hour in admiration and wonderment, for the luster of his visage outshone that of the candle. His face beamed like a pearl with light, his eyelids were languorous like those of the gazelle, the pupils of his eyes were intensely black and brilliant, His cheeks were rosy red, his eyebrows were arched like bows, and his breath exhaled a scent of musk, even as saith of him the poet, I kissed him, darker grew those pupils, which seduce my soul, and cheeks flushed rosier hue. O heart, if slanderers dare to deem there be his like in charms, say, bring him hither, you. Now when Maymuna saw him, she pronounced the formula of praise, and said, Blessed be Allah, the best of creators. For she was of the true believing Jinn, and she stood a while gazing on his face, exclaiming and envying the youth his beauty and loveliness. And she said in herself, By Allah, I will do no hurt to him, nor let any harm him. Nay, from all of evil will I ransom him. For this fair face deserveth not but that folk should gaze upon it, and for it praise the Lord. Yet how could his family find it in their hearts to leave him in such desert place, where, if one of our Marids came upon him at this hour, he would assuredly slay him? Then the Ifrita Maymuna bent over him and kissed him between the eyes, and presently drew back the sheet over his face, which she covered up. And after this she spread her wings, and soaring into the air, flew upwards. And after rising high from the circle of the saloon, she ceased not winging her way through air and ascending skywards, till she drew near the heaven of this world, the lowest of the heavens. And behold, she heard the noisy flapping of wings cleaving the welkin, and, directing herself by the sound, she found when she drew near it that the noise came from an Ifrit called Dakhnash. So she swooped down on him like a sparrowhawk, and, when he was aware of her and knew her to be Maymuna, the daughter of the king of the Jinn, he feared her and his side muscles quivered, and he implored her forbearance, saying, I conjure thee by the most great and august name, and by the most noble talisman graven upon the seal ring of Solomon, entreat me kindly and harm me not. When she heard these words, her heart inclined to him, and she said, Verily thou conjurest me, O accursed, with a mighty conjuration. Nevertheless, I will not let thee go till thou tell me whence thou comest at this hour. He replied, O princess, know that I come from the uttermost end of Chinaland, and from among the islands, and I will tell thee of a wonderful thing I have seen this night. If thou find my words true, let me wend my way, and write me a patent under thy hand, and with thy sign manual that I am thy freedman, so that none of the Jinn hosts, whether of the upper who fly, or of the lower who walk the earth, or of those who dive beneath the waters, do me let or hindrance. Rejoined Maymuna, And what is it thou hast seen on this night, O liar, O accursed? Tell me without leasing, and think not to escape from my hand with falses. For I swear to thee by the letters graven upon the bezel of the seal ring of Solomon David's son, on both of whom be peace, except thy speech be true, I will pluck out thy feathers with mine own hand, and strip off thy skin, and break thy bones. Quoth the Ifrit Dakhnash, son of Shamhurish the flyer, I accept, O my lady, these conditions. Then he resumed, Know, O my mistress, that I come tonight from the islands of the inland sea in the parts of China, which are the realms of King Ghayur, lord of the islands and the seas and the 7 palaces. There I saw a daughter of his, than whom Allah hath made none fairer in her time. I cannot picture her to thee, for my tongue would fail to describe her with her due of praise. But I will name to thee somewhat of her charms by way of approach. Now her hair is like the nights of disunion and separation, and her face like the days of union and delectation, and right well hath the poet said when picturing her, She dispread the locks from her head one night, showing 4-fold nights into one night run, and she turned her visage towards the moon, and 2 moons showed at moment one. She hath a nose like the edge of the burnished blade, and cheeks like purple wine or anemone's blood red. Her lips as coral and cornelian shine, and the water of her mouth is sweeter than old wine. Its taste would quench hell's fiery pain. Her tongue is moved by wit of high degree and ready repartee. Her breast is a seduction to all that see it. Glory be to him who fashioned it and finished it. And joined thereto are 2 upper arms smooth and rounded, even as saith of her the poet al-Walahan. She hath wrists which, did her bangles not contain, would run from out her sleeves in silvern rain. She hath breasts like 2 globes of ivory, from whose brightness the moons borrow light, and a stomach with little waves as it were a figured cloth of the finest Egyptian linen made by the Copts, with creases like folded scrolls, ending in a waist slender past all power of imagination, based upon back parts like a hillock of blown sand, that force her to sit when she would lief stand, and awaken her when she fain would sleep, even as saith of her and describeth her the poet, she hath those hips conjoined by thread of waist, hips that o'er me and her too tyrannize. My thoughts they daze whene'er I think of them, and weigh her down whene'er she would uprise. And those back parts are upborne by thighs smooth and round, and by a calf like a column of pearl, and all this reposeth upon 2 feet, narrow, slender, and pointed like spear blades, the handiwork of the protector and requiter. I wonder how, of their littleness, they can sustain what is above them. But I cut short my praises of her charms, fearing lest I be tedious.
Now when Maimuna heard the description of that princess and her beauty and loveliness, she stood silent in astonishment, whereupon Dahnash resumed,
The father of this fair maiden is a mighty king, a fierce knight, immersed night and day in fray and fight, for whom death hath no fright, and the escape of his foe no dread, for that he is a tyrant masterful and a conqueror irresistible, lord of troops and armies and continents and islands and cities and villages, and his name is King Ghayur, lord of the islands of the seas and of the 7 palaces. Now he loveth his daughter, the young maiden whom I have described to thee, with dearest love, and, for affection of her, he hath heaped together the treasures of all the kings, and built her therewith 7 palaces, each of a different fashion. The first of crystal, the second of marble, the third of china steel, the fourth of precious stones and gems of price, the 5th of porcelain and many-hued onyxes and ring bezels, the 6th of silver, and the 7th of gold. And he hath filled the 7 palaces with all sorts of sumptuous furniture, rich silken carpets and hangings and vessels of gold and silver and all manner of gear that kings require, and hath bidden his daughter to abide in each by turns for a certain season of the year, and her name is the Princess Budur. Now when her beauty became known, and her name and fame were bruited abroad in the neighboring countries, all the kings sent to her father to demand her of him in marriage, and he consulted her on the matter, but she disliked the very word wedlock with a manner of abhorrence, and said, O my father, I have no mind to marry, no, not at all, for I am a sovereign lady and a queen suzerain ruling over men, and I have no desire for a man who shall rule over me. And the more suits she refused, the more her suitors' eagerness increased, and all the royalties of the inner islands of China sent presents and rarities to her father with letters asking her in marriage. So he pressed her again and again with advice on the matter of espousals, but she ever opposed to him refusals, till at last she turned upon him angrily and cried, O my father, if thou name matrimony to me once more, I will go into my chamber, and take a sword, and, fixing its hilt on the ground, will set its point to my waist. Then will I press upon it, till it come forth from my back, and so slay myself. Now when the king heard these her words, the light became darkness in his sight, and his heart burned for her as with a flame of fire, because he feared lest she should kill herself, and he was filled with perplexity concerning her affair, and the kings her suitors. So he said to her, If thou be determined not to marry, and there be no help for it, abstain from going and coming in and out. Then he placed her in a house and shut her up in a chamber, appointing 10 old women as duennas to guard her, and forbade her to go forth to the 7 palaces. Moreover, he made it appear that he was incensed against her, and sent letters to all the kings, giving them to know that she had been stricken with madness by the Jinns, and it is now a year since she hath thus been secluded.
Then continued the Ifrit Dahnash, addressing the Ifrita Maimuna,
And I, O my lady, go to her every night and take my fill of feeding my sight on her face, and I kiss her between the eyes. Yet of my love to her, I do her no hurt, neither mount her, for that her youth is fair and her grace surpassing. Every one who seeth her jealouseth himself for her. I conjure thee therefore, O my lady, to go back with me and look on her beauty and loveliness and stature and perfection of proportion, and after, if thou wilt, chastise me or enslave me, and win to thy will, for it is thine to bid and to forbid.
So saying, the Ifrit Dahnash bowed his head towards the earth and drooped his wings downwards, But Maimuna laughed at his words and spat in his face, and answered, "What is this girl of whom thou pratest but a potsherd wherewith to wipe after making water? Faugh, faugh! By Allah, O accursed, I thought thou hadst some wondrous tale to tell me, or some marvellous news to give me. How would it be if thou were to sight my beloved? Verily this night I have seen a young man, whom if thou saw, though but in a dream, thou wouldst be palsied with admiration, and spittle would flow from thy mouth." Asked the Ifrit,
"And who and what is this youth?"
And she answered, "Know, O Dahnash, that there hath befallen the young man the like of what thou tellest me befell thy mistress, for his father pressed him again and again to marry, but he refused, till at length his sire waxed wroth at being opposed, and imprisoned him in the tower where I dwell, and I came up tonight and saw him."
Said Dahnash, "O my lady, shew me this youth, that I may see if he be indeed handsomer than my mistress, the Princess Budur, or not, for I cannot believe that the like of her liveth in this our age."
Rejoined Maimuna, "Thou liest, O accursed, O most ill-omened of Marids and vilest of Satans. Sure am I that the like of my beloved is not in this world. Art thou mad to fellow thy beloved with my beloved?" He said,
"Allah upon thee, O my lady, go back with me and look upon my mistress, and after I will return with thee and look upon thy beloved."
She answered, "It must needs be so, O accursed, for thou art a knavish devil, but I will not go with thee, nor shalt thou come with me, save upon condition of a wager, which is this. If the lover thou lovest, and of whom thou boastest so bravely, prove handsomer than mine, whom I mentioned, and whom I love, and of whom I boast, the bet shall be thine against me, but if my beloved prove the handsomer, the bet shall be mine against thee." Quoth Dahnash the Ifrit,
"O my lady, I accept this thy wager, and am satisfied thereat, so come with me to the islands."
Quoth Maimuna, "No, for the abode of my beloved is nearer than the abode of thine. Here it is under us, so come down with me to see my beloved, and after we will go look upon thy mistress."
"I hear and obey,"
said Dahnash. So they descended to earth and alighted in the saloon which the tower contained. Then Maimuna stationed Dahnash beside the bed, and, putting out her hand, drew back the silken coverlet from Kamar al-Zaman's face, when it glittered and glistened and shimmered and shone like the rising sun. She gazed at him for a moment, then turning sharply round upon Dahnash, said, "Look, O accursed, and be not the basest of madmen. I am a maid, yet my heart he hath waylaid." So Dahnash looked at the prince and long continued gazing steadfastly on him, then, shaking his head, said to Maimuna, "By Allah, O my lady, thou art excusable, but there is yet another thing to be considered, and this is, that the estate female differeth from the male. By Allah's might, this thy beloved is the likest of all created things to my mistress in beauty and loveliness and grace and perfection, and it is as though they were both cast alike in the mould of seemlihood." Now when Maimuna heard these words, the light became darkness in her sight, and she dealt him with her wing so fierce a buffet on the head as well nigh made an end of him. Then quoth she to him, "I conjure thee by the light of his glorious countenance, go at once, O accursed, and bring hither thy mistress whom thou lovest so fondly and foolishly, and return in haste that we may lay the twain together and look on them both as they lie asleep side by side. So shall it appear to us which be the goodlier and more beautiful of the two. Except thou obey me this very moment, O accursed, I will dart my sparks at thee with my fire and consume thee. Yea, in pieces I will rend thee, and into the deserts cast thee, that to stay at home and wayfarer an example thou be."
Quoth Dahnash, "O my lady, I will do thy behests, for I know for sure that my mistress is the fairer and the sweeter."
So saying, the Ifrit flew away, and Maimuna flew with him to guard him. They were absent a while, and presently returned, bearing the young lady, who was clad in a shift of fine Venetian silk, with a double edging of gold, and purfled with the most exquisite of embroidery, having these couplets worked upon the ends of the sleeves. 3 matters hinder her from visiting us in fear, of hateful, slandering envier and his hired spies, the shining light of brow, the trinket's tinkling voice, and scent of essences that tell whene'er she hies. Gin that she hide her brow with edge of sleeve, and leave at home her trinketry, how shall her scent disguise? And Dahnash and Maimuna stinted not bearing that young lady till they had carried her into the saloon, and had laid her beside the youth Kamar al-Zaman. Then they uncovered both their faces, and they were the likest of all folk, each to other, as they were twins or an only brother and sister. And indeed they were a seduction to the pious, even as saith of them the poet al-Mubin, O heart, be not thy love confined to one, lest thou by doting or disdain be undone. Love all the fair, and thou shalt find with them, if this be lost, to thee that shall be won. And quoth another, Mine eyes beheld two lying on the ground, both had I loved if on these eyne they lay. So Dahnash and Maymuna gazed on them a while, and he said, By Allah, O my lady, it is good. My mistress is assuredly the fairer. She replied, Not so, my beloved is the fairer. Woe to thee, O Dahnash! Art blind of eye and heart, that lean from fat thou canst not depart? Will thou hide the truth? Dost thou not see his beauty and loveliness and fine stature and symmetry? Out on thee! Hear what I propose to say in praise of my beloved, and, if thou be a lover true to her thou dost love, do thou the like for her thou lovest. Then she kissed Kamar al-Zaman again and again between the eyes, and improvised this ode. How is this? Why should the Balmer abuse thee in his pride? What shall console my heart for thee, that art but slender bough? A nature-cold eye thou hast that witcheth far and wide, from pure platonic love of it deliverance none I trow. Those glances fell as plundering Turk to heart such havoc deal, as never havocked scimitar made keenest at the curve. On me thou layest load of love the heaviest, while I feel so feeble grown that under weight of chemisette I swerve. My love for thee, as wottest well, is habit, and my low is nature. To all others false is all the love I tender. Now were my heart but like to thine, I never would say no. Only my wasted form is like thy waist, so gracious slender. Out on him who in beauty's robe for full moon charms hath fame, and who is claimed by mouth of men as marvel of his tribe. Of man what manner may he be, ask they who flight and blame? For whom thy heart is so distressed, I only cry, describe! O stone and tempered heart of him, learn of his yielding grace, and bending form to show me grace and yielding to consent. O my prince beautiful, thou hast an overseer in place, who irketh me, and eke a groom whose wrong doth ne'er relent. Indeed he lieth who hath said that all of loveliness was pent in Joseph. In thy charms there's many and many a Joe. The genii dread me when I stand and face to face address, but meeting thee my fluttering heart its shame and terror show. I take aversion, semblance, and I turn from thee in fright, but more aversion I assume, more love from me dost claim. That hair of jetty black, that brow e'er raying radiant light, those eyne wherein white jostles black, that dearling dainty frame. When Dahnash heard the poesy which Maymuna spake in praise of her beloved, he joyed with exceeding joy and marvelled with excessive wonderment, and said, Thou hast celebrated thy beloved in song, and thou hast indeed done well in praise of him whom thou lovest. And there is no help for it but that I also in my turn do my best to infame my mistress, and recite somewhat in her honour. Then the Ifrit went up to the Lady Budur, and, kissing her between the eyes, looked at Maymuna and at his beloved princess, and recited the following verses, albeit he had no skill in poesy. Love for my fair they chide in angry way, unjust for ignorance, yea, unjustest they. Ah, lavish favours on the love-mad, whom taste of thy wrath and parting woe shall slay. In sooth for love I'm wet with railing tears, that rail mine eyelids, blood thou mightest say. No marvel what I bear for love, 'tis marvel that any know my me while thou art away. Unlawful were our union did I doubt thy love, or heart inclined to other may. And eke these words, I feed eyes on their stead by the valley's side, and I'm slain and my slayer aside hath hied. Grief wine have I drunken, and down my cheeks dance tears to the song of the camel guide. For union blessing I strive, though sure, in Budour and Su'ad all my bliss shall bide. Wot I not which of three gave me most to plain, so hear them numbered ere thou decide. Those sworders her eyne, that lancer her figure, or ring-mailed locks which her forehead hide. Quoth she, and I ask of her what so whites, or abide in towns or in desert ride. To me, in thy heart I dwell, look there. Quoth I, where's my heart? Ah, where? Ah, where? When Maymunah heard these lines from the Ifrit, she said, "Thou hast done well, O Dahnash, but say thou, which of the two is the handsomer?" And he answered,
"My mistress Budur is handsomer than thy beloved."
Cried Maymunah, "Thou liest, O accursed! Nay, my beloved is more beautiful than thine." But Dahnash persisted,
"Mine is the fairer."
And they ceased not to wrangle and challenge each other's words, till Maymunah cried out at Dahnash and would have laid violent hands on him, but he humbled himself to her, and, softening his speech, said,
"Let not the truth be a grief to thee, and cease we this talk, for all we say is to testify in favor of our lovers. Rather let each of us withdraw the claim, and seek we one who shall judge fairly between us which of the two be fairer, and by his sentence we will abide."
"I agree to this," answered she, and smote the earth with her foot, whereupon there came out of it an Ifrit blind of an eye, humpbacked and scurvy-skinned, with eye orbits slit up and down his face. On his head were 7 horns, and 4 locks of hair fell to his heels. His hands were pitchfork-like, and his legs mast-like, and he had nails as the claws of a lion, and feet as the hoofs of the wild ass. When that Ifrit rose out of the earth and sighted Maymunah, he kissed the ground before her, and, standing with his hands clasped behind him, said, "What is thy will, O my mistress, O daughter of my king?" She replied, "O Kashkash, I would have thee judge between me and this accursed Dahnash." And she made known to him the matter from first to last, whereupon the Ifrit Kashkash looked at the face of the youth, and then at the face of the girl, and saw them lying asleep, embraced, each with an arm under the other's neck, alike in beauty and loveliness, and equal in grace and goodliness. The Marid gazed long upon them, marvelling at their seemlihood, and, after carefully observing the twain, he turned to Maymunah and Dahnash, and repeated these couplets. "Go, visit her thou lovest, and regard not the words detractors utter, envious churls, can never favour love. O sure the merciful ne'er made a thing more fair to look upon than 2 fond lovers in each other's arms, speaking their passion in a mute embrace. When heart is turned to heart, the fools would part them, strike idly on cold steel. So when thou'st found one purely, wholly thine, accept her true heart, and live for her alone. O thou that blamest the love-struck for their love, give o'er thy talk. How canst thou minister to a mind diseased?" Then he turned again to Maymunah and Dahnash, and said to them, "By Allah, if you will have the truth, I tell you fairly, the twain be equal in beauty and loveliness and perfect grace and goodliness, nor can I make any difference between them on account of their being man and woman. But I have another thought, which is that we wake each of them in turn, without the knowledge of the other, and whichever is more enamoured shall be held inferior in seemlihood and comeliness." Quoth Maymunah, "Right is this recking." And quoth Dahnash, "I consent to this." Then Dahnash changed himself to the form of a flea and bit Qamr al-Zaman, whereupon he started from sleep in a fright and rubbed the bitten part, his neck, and scratched it hard because of the smart. Then, turning sideways, he found lying by him something whose breath was sweeter than musk and whose skin was softer than cream. Hereat marvelled he with great marvel, and he sat up and looked at what lay beside him, when he saw it to be a young lady like a union pearl, or a shining sun, or a dome seen from afar on a well-built wall. For she was 5 feet tall, with a shape like the letter, bosomed high and rosy-cheeked, even as saith of her the poet, "4 things which ne'er conjoin, unless it be to storm my vitals and to shed my blood, brow white as day and tresses black as night, cheeks rosy red and lips which smiles o'erflood." And also quoth another, "A moon she rises, willow wand she waves, breathes ambergris and gazes a gazelle. Meseems that sorrow woos my heart and wins, and when she wendeth hastes therein to dwell." And when Qamr al-Zaman saw the Lady Budur, daughter of King Ghayur, and her beauty and comeliness, she was sleeping clad in a shift of Venetian silk, without her petticoat trousers, and wore on her head a kerchief embroidered with gold and set with stones of price. Her ears were hung with twin earrings which shone like constellations, and round her neck was a collar of union pearls, of size unique, past the competence of any king. When he saw this, his reason was confounded, and natural heat began to stir in him.
Allah awoke in him the desire of coition, and he said to himself, "Whatso Allah willeth, that shall be, and what he willeth not shall never be." So saying, he put out his hand and, turning her over, loosed the collar of her chemise. Then arose before his sight her bosom, with its breasts like double globes of ivory, whereat his inclination for her redoubled, and he desired her with exceeding hot desire. He would have awakened her, but she would not awake, for Dahnash had made her sleep heavy. So he shook her and moved her, saying, "O my beloved, awake and look on me, I am Qamr al-Zaman." But she awoke not, neither moved her head, whereupon he considered her case for a long hour, and said to himself, "If I guess aright, this is the damsel to whom my father would have married me, and these 3 years past I have refused her. But, inshallah, God willing, as soon as it is dawn, I will say to him, 'Marry me to her, that I may enjoy her, nor will I let half the day pass ere I possess her, and take my fill of her beauty and loveliness.'" Then he bent over Budur to kiss her, whereat the genii Maymuna trembled and was abashed, and Dahnash the Ifrit was like to fly for joy. But as Qamr al-Zaman was about to kiss her upon the mouth, he was ashamed before Allah, and turned away his head and averted his face, saying to his heart, "Have patience." Then he took thought a while, and said, "I will be patient. Haply my father, when he was wroth with me and sent me to this jail, may have brought my young lady and made her lie by my side to try me with her, and may have charged her not to be readily awakened when I would arouse her, and may have said to her, 'Whatever thing Qamr al-Zaman do to thee, make me ware thereof.' Or belike my sire standeth hidden in some stead whence, being himself unseen, he can see all I do with this young lady. And tomorrow he will scold me and cry, 'How cometh it that thou sayest, I have no mind to marry, and yet thou didst kiss and embrace yonder damsel?' So I will withhold myself, lest I be ashamed before my sire, and the right and proper thing to do is not to touch her at this present, nor even to look upon her, except to take from her somewhat which shall serve as a token to me and a memorial of her, that some sign endure between me and her." Then Qamr al-Zaman raised the young lady's hand, and took from her little finger a seal ring worth an immense amount of money, for that its bezel was a precious jewel, and around it were graven these couplets: "Count not that I your promises forgot, despite the length of your delinquencies. Be generous, O my lord, to me inclining. Haply your mouth and cheeks these lips may kiss. By Allah, ne'er will I relinquish you, albe you will transgress love's boundaries." Then Qamr al-Zaman took the seal ring from the little finger of Queen Budur, and set it on his own. Then, turning his back to her, went to sleep. When Maymuna the genii saw this, she was glad, and said to Dahnash and Kashkash, "Saw ye how my beloved Qamr al-Zaman bore himself chastely towards this young lady? Verily, this was of the perfection of his good gifts. For observe you twain how he looked on her and noted her beauty and loveliness, and yet embraced her not, neither kissed her, nor put his hand to her, but turned his back and slept." Answered they, "Even so." Thereupon Maymuna changed herself into a flea, and entering into the raiment of Budour, the loved of Dahnash, crept up her calf and came upon her thigh, and, reaching a place some 4 carats below her navel, there bit her. Thereupon she opened her eyes, and, sitting up in bed, saw a youth lying beside her and breathing heavily in his sleep, the loveliest of Almighty Allah's creatures, with eyes that put to shame the fairest houris of heaven, and a mouth like Solomon's seal, whose water was sweeter to the taste and more efficacious than a thoriac, and lips the color of coral stone, and cheeks like the blood-red anemone, even as saith one, describing him in these couplets: "My mind's withdrawn from Zainab and Nawar, by rosy cheeks that growth of myrtle bear. I love a fawn, a tunic-vested boy, and leave the love of bracelet-wearing fair. My mate in hall and closet is unlike her that I play with, as at home we pair. O thou who blamest my flight from Hind and Zainab, the cause is clear as dawn uplighting air. Wouldst have me fair a slave, the thrall of thrall, cribbed, pent, confined behind the bar and wall?" Now when Princess Budur saw him, she was seized by a transport of passion and yearning and love-longing, and she said to herself, "Alas, my shame! This is a strange youth, and I know him not.
How cometh he to be lying by my side on one bed?" Then she looked at him a second time, and noting his beauty and loveliness, said, "By Allah, he is indeed a comely youth, and my heart is well nigh torn in sunder with longing for him. But alas, how am I shamed by him! By the Almighty, had I known it was this youth who sought me in marriage of my father, I had not rejected him, but had wived with him and enjoyed his loveliness." Then she gazed in his face and said, "O my lord and light of mine eyes, awake from sleep and take thy pleasure in my beauty and grace." And she moved him with her hand, but Maymunah the genii let down sleep upon him as it were a curtain, and pressed heavily on his head with her wings so that Kamar al-Zaman awoke not. Then the Princess Budur shook him with her hands and said, "My life on thee, hearken to me, awake and up from thy sleep, and look on the Narcissus and the tender down thereon, and enjoy the sight of naked waist and navel, and tuzzle me and tumble me from this moment till break of day. Allah upon thee, O my lord, sit up and prop thee against the pillow, and slumber not." Still Kamar al-Zaman made her no reply, but breathed hard in his sleep. Continued she, "Alas, alas, thou art insolent in thy beauty and comeliness and grace and loving looks, but if thou art handsome, so am I handsome. What then is this thou dost? Have they taught thee to flout me, or hath my father, the wretched old fellow, made thee swear not to speak to me tonight?" But Kamar al-Zaman opened not his mouth, neither awoke, whereat her passion for him redoubled, and Allah inflamed her heart with love of him. She stole one glance of eyes that cost her 1,000 sighs. Her heart fluttered, and her vitals throbbed, and her hands and feet quivered, and she said to Kamar al-Zaman, "Talk to me, O my lord, speak to me, O my friend, answer me, O my beloved, and tell me thy name, for indeed thou hast ravished my wit." And during all this time he abode drowned in sleep, and answered her not a word, and the Princess Budur sighed and said, "Alas, alas, why art thou so proud and self-satisfied?" Then she shook him, and, turning his hand over, saw her seal ring on his little finger, whereat she cried a loud cry, and followed it with a sigh of passion, and said, "Alack, alack, by Allah thou art my beloved, and thou lovest me, yet thou seemest to turn thee away from me out of coquetry. For all, O my darling, thou camest to me, whilst I was asleep and knew not what thou didst with me, and tookest my seal ring, and yet I will not pull it off thy finger." So saying, she opened the bosom of his shirt, and bent over him, and kissed him, and put forth her hand to him, seeking somewhat that she might take as a token, but found nothing. Then she thrust her hand into his breast, and, because of the smoothness of his body, it slipped down to his waist, and thence to his navel, and thence to his yard, whereupon her heart ached, and her vitals quivered, and lust was sore upon her, for that the desire of women is fiercer than the desire of men, and she was ashamed of her own shamelessness. Then she plucked his seal ring from his finger, and put it on her own instead of the ring he had taken, and bussed his inner lips and hands, nor did she leave any part of him unkissed, after which she took him to her breast and embraced him, and, laying one of her hands under his neck and the other under his armpit, nestled close to him and fell asleep by his side. After doing that which she did, quoth Maymunah to Dahnash, "Saw'st thou, O accursed, how proudly and coquettishly my beloved bore himself, and how hotly and passionately thy mistress showed herself to my dearling? There can be no doubt that my beloved is handsomer than thine. Nevertheless, I pardon thee." Then she wrote him a document of manumission, and turned to Kashkash and said, "Go, help Dahnash to take up his mistress, and aid him to carry her back to her own place, for the night waneth apace, and there is but little left of it." "I hear and obey," answered Kashkash. So the two Ifrits went forward to Princess Budur, and, upraising her, flew away with her. Then, bearing her back to her own place, they laid her on her bed, whilst Maymunah abode alone with Kamar al-Zaman, gazing upon him as he slept, till the night was all but spent, when she went her way. As soon as morning morrowed, the prince awoke from sleep, and turned right and left, but found not the maiden by him, and said in his mind, "What is this business? It is as if my father would incline me to marriage with the damsel who was with me, and have now taken her away by stealth, to the intent that my desire for wedlock may redouble." Then he called out to the eunuch who slept at the door, saying, "Woe to thee, O damned one! Arise at once!" So the eunuch rose, bemused with sleep, and brought him basin and ewer, whereupon Qamr al-Zaman entered the water closet and did his need. Then, coming out, made the wuzu ablution and prayed the dawn prayer, after which he sat telling on his beads the 99 names of Almighty Allah. Then he looked up, and, seeing the eunuch standing in service upon him, said, "Out on thee, O Sawab! Who was it came hither and took away the young lady from my side, and I still sleeping?" Asked the eunuch, "O my lord, what manner of young lady?" "The young lady who lay with me last night," replied Qamr al-Zaman. The eunuch was startled at his words, and said to him, "By Allah, there hath been with thee neither young lady nor other. How should young lady have come into thee, when I was sleeping in the doorway, and the door was locked? By Allah, O my lord, neither male nor female hath come into thee." Exclaimed the prince, "Thou liest, O pestilent slave! Is it of thy competence also to hoodwink me, and refuse to tell me what has become of the young lady who lay with me last night, and decline to inform me who took her away?" Replied the eunuch, and he was affrighted at him, "By Allah, O my lord, I have seen neither young lady nor young lord." His words only angered Qamr al-Zaman the more, and he said to him, "O accursed one, my father hath indeed taught thee deceit. Come hither." So the eunuch came up to him, and the prince took him by the collar and dashed him to the ground, whereupon he let fly a loud fart, and Qamr al-Zaman, kneeling upon him, kicked him and throttled him till he fainted away. Then he dragged him forth and tied him to the well rope, and let him down like a bucket into the well, and plunged him into the water, then drew him up and lowered him down again. Now it was hard winter weather, and Qamr al-Zaman ceased not to plunge the eunuch into the water and pull him up again, and douse him and haul him, whilst he screamed and called for help. And the prince kept on saying, "By Allah, O damned one, I will not draw thee up out of this well till thou tell me and fully acquaint me with the story of the young lady, and who it was took her away whilst I slept." Answered the eunuch, after he had seen death staring him in the face, "O my lord, let me go, and I will relate to thee the truth and the whole tale." So Qamr al-Zaman pulled him up out of the well, all but dead for suffering, what with cold and the pain of dipping and dousing, drubbing and the dread of drowning. He shook like cane in a hurricane, his teeth were clenched as by cramp, and his clothes were drenched and his body befouled and torn by the rough sides of the well. Briefly, he was in a sad pickle. Now when Qamr al-Zaman saw him in this sorry plight, he was concerned for him, but as soon as the eunuch found himself on the floor, he said to him, "O my lord, let me go and doff my clothes and wring them out and spread them in the sun to dry, and don others, after which I will return to thee forthwith and tell thee the truth of the matter." Answered the prince, "O rascal slave, hadst thou not seen death face to face, never hadst thou confessed to fact nor told me a word. But go now and do thy will, and then come back to me at once and tell me the truth." Thereupon the eunuch went out, hardly crediting his escape, and ceased not running, stumbling and rising in his haste, till he came in to King Shahriman, whom he found sitting at talk with his wazir of Qamr al-Zaman's case. The king was saying to the minister,
"I slept not last night, for anxiety concerning my son, Qamr al-Zaman, and indeed I fear lest some harm befall him in that old tower. What good was there in imprisoning him?"
Answered the wazir, "Have no care for him. By Allah, no harm will befall him, none at all. Leave him in prison for a month till his temper yield and his spirit be broken and he return to his senses." As the two spoke, behold, up rushed the eunuch, in the aforesaid plight, making the king who was troubled at sight of him, and he cried, "O our lord the Sultan, verily thy son's wits are fled, and he hath gone mad. He hath dealt with me thus and thus, so that I am become as thou seest me, and he kept saying, 'A young lady lay with me this night, and stole away secretly whilst I slept. Where is she?' And he insisteth on my letting him know where she is, and on my telling him who took her away. But I have seen neither girl nor boy. The door was locked all through the night, for I slept before it with the key under my head, and I opened to him in the morning with my own hand." When King Shahriman heard this, he cried out, saying,
"Alas, my son!"
And he was enraged with sore rage against the wazir, who had been the cause of all this case, and said to him,
"Go up, bring me news of my son, and see what hath befallen his mind."
So the wazir rose and, stumbling over his long skirts, in his fear of the king's wrath, hastened with the slave to the tower. Now the sun had risen, and when the minister came in to Qamr al-Zaman, he found him sitting on the couch reciting the Koran. So he saluted him and seated himself by his side, and said to him, "O my lord, this wretched eunuch brought us tidings which troubled and alarmed us, and which incensed the king." Asked Qamr al-Zaman, "And what hath he told you of me to trouble my father? In good sooth he hath troubled none but me." Answered the wazir, "He came to us in fulsome state, and told us of thee a thing which heaven forfend, and the slave added a lie which it befitteth not to repeat. Allah preserve thy youth and sound sense and tongue of eloquence, and forbid to come from thee aught of offence." Quoth the prince, "O wazir, and what thing did this pestilent slave say of me?" The minister replied, "He told us that thy wits had taken leave of thee, and thou wouldst have it that a young lady lay with thee last night, and thou wast instant with him to tell thee whither she went, and thou didst torture him to that end." But when Qamr al-Zaman heard these words, he was enraged with sore rage, and he said to the wazir, "'Tis manifest to me in very deed that you people taught the eunuch to do as he did, and forbade him to tell me what became of the young lady who lay with me last night. But thou, O wazir, art cleverer than the eunuch, so do thou tell me without stay or delay, whither went the young lady who slept on my bosom last night? For it was you who sent her and bade her sleep in my embrace, and we lay together till dawn. But when I awoke, I found her not. So where is she now?" Said the wazir, "O my lord Qamr al-Zaman, Allah's name encompass thee about. By the Almighty, we sent none to thee last night, but thou layest alone, with the door locked on thee and the eunuch sleeping behind it. Nor did there come to thee young lady or any other. Regain thy reason, O my lord, and stablish thy senses, and occupy not thy mind with vanities." Rejoined Qamr al-Zaman, who was incensed at his words, "O wazir, the young lady in question is my beloved, the fair one with the black eyes and rosy cheeks, whom I held in my arms all last night." So the minister wondered at his words, and asked him, "Didst thou see this damsel last night with thine own eyes, on wake or in sleep?" Answered Qamr al-Zaman, "O ill-omened old man, dost thou fancy I saw her with my ears? Indeed, I saw her with my very eyes, and awake, and I touched her with my hand, and I watched by her full half the night, feeding my vision on her beauty and loveliness and grace and tempting looks. But you had schooled her and charged her to speak no word to me, so she feigned sleep, and I lay by her side till dawn, when I awoke and found her gone." Rejoined the wazir, "O my lord Qamr al-Zaman, haply thou sawest this in thy sleep. It must have been a delusion of dreams, or a deception caused by eating various kinds of food, or a suggestion of the accursed devils." Cried the prince, "O pestilent old man, wilt thou too make a mock of me, and tell me this was haply a delusion of dreams, when that eunuch confessed to the young lady, saying, 'At once I will return to thee and tell thee all about her'?" With these words he sprang up and rushed at the wazir, and gripped hold of his beard, which was long, and, after gripping it, he twisted his hand in it, and hailing him off the couch, threw him on the floor. It seemed to the minister as though his soul departed his body for the violent plucking at his beard, and Qamr al-Zaman ceased not kicking the wazir, and basting his breast and ribs, and cuffing him with open hand on the nape of his neck till he had well nigh beaten him to death. Then said the old man in his mind, "Just as the eunuch slave saved his life from this lunatic youth by telling him a lie, thus it is even fitter that I do likewise, else he will destroy me. So now for my lie to save myself, he being mad beyond a doubt." Then he turned to Qamr al-Zaman and said, "O my lord, pardon me, for indeed thy father charged me to conceal from thee this affair of the young lady, but now I am weak and weary and wounded with tunding, for I am an old man and lack strength and bottom to endure blows. Have therefore a little patience with me, and I will tell thee all and acquaint thee with the story of the young woman." When the prince heard this, he left off drubbing him, and said, "Wherefore couldst thou not tell me the tale until after shame and blows? Rise now, unlucky old man that thou art, and tell me her story." Quoth the wazir, "Say, dost thou ask of the young lady with the fair face and perfect form?" Quoth Qamr al-Zaman, "Even so. Tell me, O Wazir, who it was that led her to me and laid her by my side, and who was it that took her away from me by night? And let me know forthright whither she is gone, that I myself may go to her at once. If my father did this deed to me that he might try me by means of that beautiful girl, with a view to our marriage, I consent to wed her and free myself of this trouble. For he did all these dealings with me only because I refused wedlock. But now I consent, and I say again, I consent to matrimony. So tell this to my father, O Wazir, and advise him to marry me to that young lady, for I will have none other, and my heart loveth none save her alone. Now rise up at once, and haste thee to my father, and counsel him to hurry on our wedding, and bring me his answer within this very hour. Rejoined the Wazir, "'Tis well," and went forth from him, hardly believing himself out of his hands. Then he set off from the tower, walking and tripping up as he went, for excess of fright and agitation, and he ceased not hurrying till he came in to King Shahriman, who said to him as he sighted him,
O thou Wazir, what man hath brought thee to grief, and whose mischief hath treated thee in way unlief? How happeneth it that I see thee dumbfoundered, and coming to me thus astounded?
Replied the Wazir, O king, I bring thee good news.
And what is it?
Quoth Shahriman, and quoth the Wazir, Know that thy son Kamar al-Zaman's wits are clean gone, and that he hath become stark mad. Now when the king heard these words of the minister, light became darkness in his sight, and he said,
O Wazir, make clear to me the nature of his madness.
Answered the Wazir, O my lord, I hear and I obey. Then he told him that such and such had passed, and acquainted him with all that his son had done. Whereupon the king said to him,
Hear, O Wazir, the good tidings which I give thee in return for this thy fair news of my son's insanity. And it shall be the cutting off of thy head and the forfeiture of my favour, O most ill-omened of wazirs and foulest of emirs, for I feel that thou hast caused my son's disorder by the wicked advice and the sinister counsel thou hast given me first and last. By Allah, if aught of mischief or madness have befallen my son, I will most assuredly nail thee upon the palace dome, and make thee drain the bitterest draught of death.
Then he sprang up, and, taking the Wazir with him, fared straight for the tower and entered it. And when Kamar al-Zaman saw the two, he rose to his father in haste from the couch whereon he sat, and kissing his hands, drew back and hung down his head, and stood before him with his arms behind him, and thus remained for a full hour. Then he raised his head towards his sire, the tears gushed from his eyes and streamed down his cheeks, and he began repeating, Forgive the sin neath which my limbs are trembling, for the slave seeks mercy from his master. I've done a fault which calls for free confession. Where shall it call for mercy and forgiveness? When the king heard this, he arose and embraced his son, and kissing him between the eyes, made him sit by his side on the couch. Then he turned to the Wazir, and, looking on him with eyes of wrath, said,
O dog of wazirs, how didst thou say of my son such and such things, and make my heart quake for him?
Then turned he to the prince, and said,
O my son, what is today called?
He answered, O my father, this day is the Sabbath, and tomorrow is first day, then comes second day, third, fourth, fifth day, and lastly Friday. Exclaimed the king,
O my son, O Kamar al-Zaman, praised be Allah for the preservation of thy reason. What is the present month called in our Arabic?
Dhul-Qa'dah, answered Kamar al-Zaman. And it is followed by Dhul-Hijjah, then cometh Muharram, then Safar, then Rabi'ah the first and Rabi'ah the second, the two Jamadas, Rajab, Sha'aban, Ramadan, and Shawwal. At this the king rejoiced exceedingly, and spat in the Wazir's face, saying,
O wicked old man, how canst thou say that my son is mad? And now none is mad but thou.
Hereupon the minister shook his head, and would have spoken, but bethought himself to wait a while and see what might next befall. Then the king said to his child,
O my son, what words be these thou saidst to the eunuch and the Wazir, declaring, I was sleeping with a fair damsel this night. What damsel is this of whom thou speakest?
Then Kamar al-Zaman laughed at his father's words and replied, O my father, know that I can bear no more jesting, so add me not another mock or even a single word on the matter, for my temper hath waxed short by that you have done with me. And know, O my father, with assured knowledge, that I consent to marry, but on condition that thou give me to wife her who lay by my side this night, for I am certain it was thou sentest her to me, and madest me in love with her, and then dispatchedst a message to her before the dawn, and tookest her away from beside me. Rejoined the king,
The name of Allah encompass thee about, O my son, and be thy wit preserved from witlessness. What thing be this young lady whom thou fanciest I sent to thee last night, and then again that I sent to withdraw her from thee before dawn? By the Lord, O my son, I know nothing of this affair. And Allah upon thee, tell me if it be a delusion of dreaming or a deception caused by indisposition. For verily thou layest down to sleep last night with thy mind occupied anent marriage, and troubled with the talk of it. Allah damn marriage, and the hour when I spake of it, and curse him who counselled it. And without doubt or diffidence I can say that being moved in mind by the mention of wedlock, thou dreamedest that a handsome young lady embraced thee, and didst fancy thou sawest her when awake. But all this, O my son, is but an imbroglio of dreams.
Replied Qamr al-Zaman, Leave this talk, and swear to me by Allah, the All-Creator, the Omniscient, the humbler of the tyrant Caesars and the destroyer of the Khosrows, that thou knowest not of the young lady nor of her warning place. Quoth the king,
By the might of Allah Almighty, the God of Moses and Abraham, I know naught of all this, and never even heard of it. It is assuredly a delusion of dreams thou hast seen in sleep.
Then the prince replied to his sire, I will give thee a self-evident proof that it happened to me when on wake. Now let me ask thee, did it ever befall any man to dream that he was battling a sore battle, and after to awake from sleep and find in his hand a sword blade besmeared with blood? Answered the king,
No, by Allah, O my son, this hath never been.
Rejoined Qamr al-Zaman, I will tell thee what happened to me, and it was this. Meseemed I awoke from sleep in the middle of the past night, and found a girl lying by my side, whose form was like mine, and whose favour was as mine. I embraced her, and turned her about with my hand, and took her seal ring, which I put on my finger, and she pulled off my ring, and put it on hers. Then I went to sleep by her side, but refrained from her for shame of thee, deeming that thou hadst sent her to me, intending to tempt me with her and incline me to marriage, and suspecting thee to be hidden somewhere whence thou couldst see what I did with her. And I was ashamed even to kiss her on the mouth for thy account, thinking over this temptation to wedlock. And when I awoke at point of day, I found no trace of her, nor could I come at any news of her, and there befell me what thou knowest of with the eunuch and with the wazir. How, then, can this case have been a dream and a delusion, when the ring is a reality? Save for her ring on my finger, I should indeed have deemed it a dream. But here is the ring on my little finger. Look at it, O king, and see what is its worth. So saying, he handed the ring to his father, who examined it and turned it over, then looked to his son and said,
Verily there is in this ring some mighty mystery and some strange secret. What befell thee last night with the girl is indeed a hard nut to crack, and I know not how intruded upon us this intruder. None is the cause of all this pother save the wazir, but Allah upon thee, O my son, take patience, so haply the Lord may turn to gladness this thy grief, and to thy sadness bring complete relief, as quoth one of the poets. Haply shall fortune draw her rein, and bring fair chance, for she is changeful, jealous, vain. Still may I woo my want and wishes win, and see on heels of care unfeign the fain. And now, O my son, I am certified at this hour that thou art not mad, but thy case is a strange one, which none can clear up for thee save the Almighty.
Cried the prince, By Allah, O my father, deal kindly with me, and seek out this young lady, and hasten her coming to me, else I shall die of woe, and of my death shall no one know. Then he betrayed the ardour of his passion, and turned towards his father, and repeated these two couplets. If your promise of personal call prove untrue, deign in vision to grant me an interview. Quoth they, how can phantom appear to the sight of a youth whose sight is fordone, perdue? Then, after ending his poetry, Qamr al-Zaman again turned to his father with submission and despondency, and, shedding tears in flood, began repeating these lines. Beware that eye-glance which hath magic might, wherever turn those orbs it bars our flight, nor be deceived by low sweet voice that breathes a fever festering in the heart and sprite, so soft that silky skin were rose to touch it, she'd cry and teardrops rain for pain and fright. Did Zephyr e'en in sleep pass o'er her land, scented he'd chose to dwell in scented sight. Her necklets vie with tinkling of her belt, her wrists strike either wristlet dumb with spite. When would her bangles bust those rings in ear, upon the lover's eyen high mysteries light? I'm blamed for love of her, nor pardon claim, eyes are not profiting which lack foresight. Heaven strip thee, blamer mine, unjust art thou, before this fawn must every eye low bow. After which he said, By Allah, O my father, I cannot endure to be parted from her even for an hour. The king smote hand upon hand and exclaimed,
There is no majesty and there is no might, save in Allah, the glorious, the great. No cunning contrivance can profit us in this affair.
Then he took his son by the hand and carried him to the palace, where Qamr al-Zaman lay down on the bed of languor, and the king sat at his head, weeping and mourning over him, and leaving him not, night or day, till at last the wazir came in to him and said, O king of the age and the time, how long wilt thou remain shut up with thy son, and hide thyself from thy troops? Haply the order of thy realm may be deranged by reason of thine absence from thy grandees and officers of state. It behoveth the man of understanding, if he have various wounds in his body, to apply him first to medicine the most dangerous. So it is my counsel to thee that thou remove thy son from this place to the pavilion, which is in the palace overlooking the sea, and shut thyself up with him there, setting apart in every week 2 days, Thursday and Monday, for state receptions and progresses and reviews. On these days let thine emirs and wazirs and chamberlains and viceroys and high officials and grandees of the realm and the rest of the levies and lieges have access to thee, and submit their affairs to thee, and do thou their needs and judge among them and give and take with them and bid and forbid. And the rest of the week thou shalt pass with thy son, Qamr al-Zaman, and cease not thus doing till Allah shall vouchsafe relief to you twain. Think not, O king, that thou art safe from the shifts of time and the strokes of change which come like a traveller in the night, for the wise man is ever on his guard, and how well saith the poet, Thou deemedst well of time when days went well, and fearedst not what ills might bring thee fate. The nights so fair and restful cozened thee, for peaceful nights bring woes of heavy weight. O children of mankind whom time befriends, beware of time's deceits, or soon or late. When the Sultan heard his wazir's words, he saw that they were right, and deemed his counsel wise, and it had effect upon him, for he feared lest the order of the state be deranged. So he rose at once and bade transport his son from his sick room to the pavilion in the palace overlooking the sea. Now this palace was girt round by the waters, and was approached by a causeway 20 cubits wide. It had windows on all sides commanding an ocean view, its floor was paved with parti-colored marbles, and its ceiling was painted in the richest pigments and figured with gold and lapis lazuli. They furnished it for Qamr al-Zaman with splendid upholstery, embroidered rugs and carpets of the richest silk, and they clothed the walls with choice brocades and hung curtains bespangled with gems of price. In the midst they set him a couch of juniper wood inlaid with pearls and jewels, and Qamr al-Zaman sat down thereon, but the excess of his concern and his passion for the young lady had wasted his charms and emaciated his body. He could neither eat nor drink nor sleep, and he was like a man who had been sick 20 years of sore sickness. His father seated himself at his head, grieving for him with deepest grief, and every Monday and Thursday he gave his wazirs and emirs and chamberlains and viceroys and lords of the realm and levies and the rest of his lieges leave to come up to him in that pavilion. So they entered and did their several service and duties, and abode with him till the end of the day, when they went their ways, and the king returned to his son in the pavilion, whom he left not night nor day, and he ceased not doing on this wise for many days and nights. Such was the case with Qamr al-Zaman, son of King Shahriman, but as regards Princess Budur, daughter of King Ghayur, lord of the Isles and the 7 palaces, when the 2 Jinns bore her up and laid her on her bed, she slept till daybreak, when she awoke and, sitting upright, looked right and left, but saw not the youth who had lain in her bosom. At this her vitals flooded, her reason fled, and she shrieked a loud shriek which awoke all her slave girls and nurses and duennas. They flocked into her, and the chief of them came forward and asked, "What aileth thee, O my lady?" Answered the princess, "O wretched old woman, where is my beloved, the handsome youth who lay last night in my bosom? Tell me whither he is gone." Now, when the duenna heard this, the light starkened in her sight, and she feared from her mischief with sore affright, and said to her, "O my Lady Budur, what unseemly words are these?" Cried the princess, "Woe to thee, pestilent crone that thou art! I ask thee again, where is my beloved, the goodly youth with the shining face and the slender form, the jetty eyes and the joined eyebrows, who lay with me last night from supper-tide till daybreak?" She rejoined, "By Allah, O my lady, I have seen no young man nor any other. I conjure thee, carry not this unseemly jest too far, lest we all lose our lives. For perhaps the joke may come to thy father's ears, and who shall then deliver us from his hand?" The princess rejoined, "In very sooth a youth lay with me last night, one of the fairest-faced of men." Exclaimed the duenna, "Heaven preserve thy reason! Indeed, no one lay with thee last night." Thereupon the princess looked at her hand, and, finding Kamar al-Zaman's seal ring on her finger instead of her own, said to her, "Woe to thee, thou accursed, thou traitress! Wilt thou lie to me and tell me that none lay with me last night, and swear to me a falsehood in the name of the Lord?" Replied the duenna, "By Allah, I do not lie to thee, nor have I sworn falsely." Then the princess was incensed by her words, and, drawing a sword she had by her, she smote the old woman with it and slew her, whereupon the eunuch and the waiting women and the concubines cried out at her, and ran to her father, and, without stay or delay, acquainted him with her case. So the king went to her, and asked her, "O my daughter, what aileth thee?" And she answered, "O my father, where is the youth who lay with me last night?" Then her reason fled from her head, and she cast her eyes right and left, and rent her raiment even to the skirt. When her sire saw this, he bade the women lay hands on her. So they seized her and manacled her. Then, putting a chain of iron about her neck, made her fast to one of the palace windows, and there left her. Thus far concerning Princess Budur. But as regards her father, King Ghayur, the world was straitened upon him when he saw what had befallen his daughter, for that he loved her, and her case was not a little grievous to him. So he summoned on it the doctors and astrologers, and men skilled in talisman writing, and said to them, "Whoso healeth my daughter of what ill she hath, I will marry him to her, and give him half of my kingdom. But whoso cometh to her and cureth her not, I will strike off his head, and hang it over the palace gate." Accordingly, all who went into her, but failed to heal her, he beheaded, and hung their heads over the palace gates, till he had beheaded on her account 40 doctors, and crucified 40 astrologers. Wherefore the general held aloof from her, all the physicians having failed to medicine her malady. And her case was a puzzle to the men of science, and the adepts in Kabbalistic characters. And as her longing and passion redoubled, and love and distraction wore sore upon her, she poured forth tears, and repeated these couplets. "My fondness, O my moon, for thee my foeman is, and to thy comradeship the nights my thought compel. In gloom I bide with fire that flames below my ribs, whose low I make comparison with heat of hell. I'm plagued with sorest stress of pine and ecstasy, nor clearest noontide can that horrid pain dispel." Then she sighed, and repeated these also. "Salams from me to friends in every stead, indeed to all dear friends do I incline. Salams, but not salams that bid adieu, salams that grow of good for you design. I love you dear, indeed, nor less your land, but bide I far from every need of mine." And when the Lady Budur ceased repeating her poetry, she wept till her eyes waxed sore, and her cheeks changed form and hue, and in this condition she continued 3 years. Now she had a foster brother by name ᚗᚗᚏᚁ, who was travelling in far lands and absent from her the whole of this time. He loved her with an exceeding love, passing the love of brothers. So when he came back, he went in to his mother and asked for his sister, the Princess Budur. She answered him, "O my son, thy sister hath been smitten with madness, and hath passed these 3 years with a chain of iron about her neck, and all the physicians and men of science have failed of healing her." When ᚗᚗᚏᚁ heard these words, he said, "I must needs go in to her. Peradventure I may discover what she hath, and be able to medicine her." And his mother replied, Needs must thou visit her, but wait till tomorrow, that I may contrive some thing to suit thy case. Then she went afoot to the palace of the Lady Budur, and, accosting the eunuch in charge of the gates, made him a present, and said to him, I have a daughter, who was brought up with thy mistress, and since then I married her. And when that befell the princess which befell her, she became troubled and sore concerned, and I desire of thy favour that my daughter may go into her, and for an hour look on her, and then return whence she came, so that none shall know of it. Quoth the eunuch, This may not be except by night, after the king hath visited his child and gone away. Then come thou and thy daughter. So she kissed the eunuch's hand, and, returning home, waited till the morrow at nightfall. And when it was time, she arose and sought her son ᚗᚗᚏ, and attired him in women's apparel. Then, taking his hand in hers, led him towards the palace, and ceased not walking with him, till she came upon the eunuch after the sultan had ended his visit to the princess. Now when the eunuch saw her, he rose to her, and said, Enter, but do not prolong thy stay. So they went in, and when ᚗᚗᚏ beheld the Lady Budur in the aforesaid plight, he saluted her, after his mother had doffed his woman's garb. Then he took out of their satchel books he had brought with him, and, lighting a wax candle, he began to recite certain conjurations. Thereupon the princess looked at him, and recognizing him, said, O my brother, thou hast been absent on thy travels, and thy news have been cut off from us. He replied, True, but Allah hath brought me back safe and sound. I am now minded to set out again, nor hath aught delayed me but the news I hear of thee. Wherefore my heart burned for thee, and I came to thee, so haply I may free thee of thy malady. She rejoined, O my brother, thinkest thou it is madness aileth me? Yes, answered he, and she said, Not so, by Allah, 'tis even as saith the poet. Quoth they, Thou ravest on him thou lovest. Quoth I, The sweets of love are only for the insane. Love never maketh time his friend befriend, only the Jinn-struck wight such boon can gain. Well, yes, I'm mad, bring him who madded me, and if he cure my madness, blame restrain. Then she let ᚗᚗᚏ know that she was love-daft, and he said, Tell me concerning thy tale and what befell thee. Haply there may be in my hand something which shall be a means of deliverance for thee. Quoth she, O my brother, hear my story, which is this. One night I awoke from sleep in the last third of the night, and, sitting up, saw by my side the handsomest of youths that be, and tongue faileth to describe him, for he was as a willow wand or an Indian rattan cane. So methought it was my father who had done on this wise in order thereby to try me, for that he had consulted me concerning wedlock, when the king sought me of him to wife, and I had refused. It was this thought withheld me from arousing him, for I feared that, if I did aught or embraced him, he would peradventure inform my father of my doings. But in the morning I found on my finger his seal ring, in place of my own which he had taken. And oh, my brother, my heart was seized with love of him at first sight, and for the violence of my passion and longing, I have never savoured the taste of sleep, and have no occupation save weeping alway, and repeating verses night and day. And this, O my brother, is my story, and the cause of my madness. Then she poured forth tears, and repeated these couplets. Now love hast banished all that bred delight. With that heart-nibbling fawn my joys took flight. Lightest of trifles lover's blood to him, who wastes the vitals of the hapless wight. For him I'm jealous of my sight and thought, my heart acts spy upon my thought and sight. Those long-lashed eyelids rain on me their shafts, guileful, destroying hearts where'er they light. Now, while my portion in the world endures, shall I behold him ere I quit world sight? What bear I for his sake I'd hide, but tears betray my feelings to the spy's despite. When near, our union seemeth ever far, when far, my thoughts to him I nearest are. And presently she continued, See then, O my brother, how thou mayest aid me in mine affliction. So ᚗᚗᚏ bowed his head groundwards awhile, wondering and not knowing what to do. Then he raised it and said to her, All thou hast spoken to me I hold to be true, though the case of the young man pass my understanding. But I will go round about all lands, and will seek for what may heal thee. Haply Allah shall appoint thy healing to be at my hand. Meanwhile, take patience and be not disquieted. Thereupon ᚗᚗᚏ farewelled her, praying that she might be constant, and left her repeating these couplets. Thine image ever accompanies my sprite, for all thou art distant from then pilgrim's sight. But my heart wishes e'er attract thee near, What is the lightning's speed to thought's swift flight? Then go not thou, my very light of eyes, which, when thou'rt gone, lack all the coal of light. Then ᚗᚗᚁ returned to his mother's house, where he passed the night. And when the morrow dawned, having equipped himself for his journey, he fared forth and ceased not faring from city to city and from island to island for a whole month, till he came to a town named al-Tayrab. Here he went about scenting news of the townsfolk, so haply he might light on a cure for the princess's malady. For in every capital he entered or passed by, it was reported that Queen Budur, daughter of King Ghayur, had lost her wits. But arriving at al-Tayrab city, he heard that Qamr al-Zaman, son of King Shahriman, was fallen sick and afflicted with melancholy madness. So ᚗᚗᚁ asked the name of the prince's capital, and they said to him, "It is on the islands of Khalidan, and it lieth distant from our city a whole month's journey by sea, but by land it is 6 months' march." So he went down to the sea in a ship which was bound for the Khalidan Isles, and she sailed with a favouring breeze for a whole month, till they came in sight of the capital. And there remained for them but to make the land, when, behold, there came out on them a tempestuous wind, which carried away the masts and rent the canvas, so that the sails fell into the sea, and the ship capsized, with all on board, and each sought his own safety. And as for ᚗᚗᚁ, the set of the sea carried him unto the king's palace, wherein was Qamr al-Zaman. And by the decree of destiny it so happened that this was the day on which King Shahriman gave audience to his grandees and high officers, and he was sitting with his son's head on his lap, whilst a eunuch fanned away the flies. And the prince had not spoken, neither had he eaten nor drunk for 2 days, and he was grown thinner than a spindle. Now the wazir was standing respectfully afoot near the latticed window giving on the sea, and, raising his eyes, saw ᚗᚗᚁ being beaten by the billows and at his last gasp, whereupon his heart was moved to pity for him, so he drew near to the king, and moving his head towards him, said, "I crave thy leave, O king, to go down to the court of the pavilion and open the water gate, that I may rescue a man who is at the point of drowning in the sea, and bring him forth of danger into deliverance. Peradventure, on this account Allah may free thy son from what he hath." The king replied,
O thou wazir, enough is that which hath befallen my son through thee, and on thine account. Haply, if thou rescue this drowning man, he will come to know our affairs, and look on my son who is in this state, and exult over me. But I swear by Allah, that if this half-drowned wretch come hither and learn our condition, and look upon my son, and then fare forth and speak of our secrets to any, I will assuredly strike off thy head before his. For thou, O my minister, art the cause of all that hath betided us, first and last. Now do as thou wilt.
Thereupon the wazir sprang up, and, opening the private postern which gave upon the sea, descended to the causeway, then walked on 20 steps, and came to the water, where he saw ᚗᚗᚁ nigh unto death. So he put out his hand to him, and, catching him by his hair, drew him ashore in a state of insensibility, with belly full of water and eyes half out of his head. The wazir waited till he came to himself, when he pulled off his wet clothes and clad him in a fresh suit, covering his head with one of the servants' turbans, after which he said to him, "Know that I have been the means of saving thee from drowning. Do not thou requite me by causing my death and thine own." Asked ᚗᚗᚁ, "And how so?" And the wazir answered, "Thou art at this hour about to go up and pass among the emirs and wazirs, all of them silent and none speaking, because of Qamr al-Zaman, the son of the sultan." Now, when ᚗᚗᚁ heard the name of Qamr al-Zaman, he knew that this was he whom he had heard spoken of in sundry cities, and of whom he came in search. But he feigned ignorance, and asked the wazir, "And who is Qamr al-Zaman?" Answered the minister, "He is the son of Sultan Shahriman, and he is sore sick, and lieth strown on his couch restless alway, eating not, nor drinking, neither sleeping night or day. Indeed, he is nigh upon death, and we have lost hope of his living, and are certain that he is dying. Beware lest thou look too long on him, or thou look on any place other than that where thou settest thy feet, else thou art a lost man, and I also." He replied, "Allah upon thee, O wazir, I implore thee of thy favour, acquaint me touching this youth thou describest. What is the cause of the condition in which he is?" The wazir replied, "I know none, save that 3 years ago his father required him to wed, but he refused,
whereat the king was wroth and imprisoned him, and when he awoke on the morrow, he fancied that during the night he had been roused from sleep and had seen by his side a young lady of passing loveliness, whose charms tongue can never express. And he assured us that he had plucked off her seal ring from her finger, and had put it on his own, and that she had done likewise. But we know not the secret of all this business. So by Allah, O my son, when thou comest up with me into the palace, look not on the prince, but go thy way, for the sultan's heart is full of wrath against me.
So said Marzawan to himself, By Allah, this is the one I sought. Then he followed the wazir up to the palace, where the minister seated himself at the prince's feet. But Marzawan found forsooth nothing to do but go up to Kamar al-Zaman and stand before him at gaze. Upon this the wazir died of a fright in his skin, and kept looking at Marzawan and signalling him to wend his way, but he feigned not to see him, and gave not over gazing upon Kamar al-Zaman till he was well assured that it was indeed he whom he was seeking, and cried, Exalted be Allah, who hath made his shape even as her shape, and his complexion as her complexion, and his cheek as her cheek. Upon this Kamar al-Zaman opened his eyes and gave earnest ear to his speech, and when Marzawan saw him inclining to hear, he repeated these couplets. I see thee full of song and plaint and love's own ecstasy, delighting in describing all the charms of loveliness. Art smit by stroke of love, or hath shaft shot wounded thee? None save the wounded ever show such signals of distress. Ho thou, crown the wine cup and sing me singular praises to Sulaiman al-Rabab Tanum addressed. Go round the grapevine sun which for mansion hath a jar, whose east the cup-boy is, and hear my mouth that opes for west. I'm jealous of the very clothes that dare her sides enroll, when she veils her dainty body of the delicatest grace. I envy every goblet of her lips that taketh toll, when she sets the kissing cup on that sweetest kissing place. But deem not by the keen-edged scimitar I'm slain, the hurts and harms I dree are from arrows of her eyes. I found her fingertips, as I meet her once again, deep reddened with the juice of the wood that ruddy dyes. And cried, Thy palms thou stainedest when far away was I, and this is how thou payest one distracted by his pine? Quoth she, enkindling in my heart a flame that burned high, speaking as one who cannot hide of longing love the sign. By thy life, this is no dye used for dyeing, so forbear thy blame, nor in charging me with falsing love persist. But when upon our parting day I saw thee haste to fare, the while were bared my hand, and my elbow, and my wrist. I shed a flood of blood-red tears, and with fingers brushed away, hence blood-reddened were the tips, and still blood-red they remain. Had I wept before she wept, to my longing love a prey, before repentance came, I had quit my soul of pain. Blame me not for loving her, now on self of love I swear, for her sake, for her only, these pains my soul torment. She hath all the lair of Luqman and Yusuf's beauty lief, sweet singer David's voice and Maryam's chastity, while I've all Jacob's mourning and Jonah's prison grief, and the sufferings of Job and old Adam's history. Yet kill her not, albeit of my love for her I die, but ask her why my blood to her was lawful, ask her, why? When Marzawan recited this ode, the words fell upon Kamar al-Zaman's heart as freshness after fever and returning health. And he sighed, and, turning his tongue in his mouth, said to his sire, O my father, let this youth come and sit by my side. Now, when the king heard these words from his son, he rejoiced with exceeding joy, though at the first his heart had been set against Marzawan, and he had determined that the stranger's head needs must be stricken off. But when he heard Kamar al-Zaman speak, his anger left him, and he arose, and drawing Marzawan to him, seated him by his son, and turning to him, said,
Praised be Allah for thy safety.
He replied, Allah preserve thee, and preserve thy son to thee, and called down blessings on the king. Then the king asked,
From what country art thou?
And he answered, From the islands of the inland sea, the kingdom of King Ghayur, lord of the isles and the seas and the 7 palaces. Quoth King Shahriman,
Maybe thy coming shall be blessed to my son, and Allah vouchsafe to heal what is in him.
Quoth Marzawan, Inshallah, naught shall be save what shall be well. Then, turning to Kamar al-Zaman, he said to him in his ear, unheard of the king in his court,
O my lord, be of good cheer, and hearten thy heart, and let thine eyes be cool and clear, and, with respect to her for whose sake thou art thus, ask not of her case on thine account. But thou keptest thy secret and fellest sick, while she told her secret, and they said she had gone mad. So she is now in prison, with an iron chain about her neck, in most piteous plight. But, Allah willing, the healing of both of you shall come from my hand. Now, when Qamr al-Zaman heard these words, his life returned to him, and he took heart and felt a thrill of joy, and signed to his father to help him sit up. And the king was like to fly for gladness, and rose hastily and lifted him up. Presently, of fear for his son, he shook the kerchief of dismissal, and all the emirs and wazirs withdrew. Then he set 2 pillows for his son to lean upon, after which he bade them perfume the palace with saffron and decorate the city, saying to Marzawan,
By Allah, O my son, of a truth thine aspect be a lucky and a blessed.
And he made as much of him as he might, and called for food, and when they brought it, Marzawan came up to the prince, and said, Rise, eat with me. So he obeyed him and ate with him, and all the while the king invoked blessings on Marzawan, and said,
How auspicious is thy coming, O my son!
And when the father saw his boy eat, his joy and gladness redoubled, and he went out and told the prince's mother and all the household. Then he spread throughout the palace the good news of the prince's recovery, and the king commanded the decoration of the city, and it was a day of high festival. Marzawan passed that night with Qamr al-Zaman, and the king also slept with them in joy and delight for his son's recovery. And when the next morning dawned, and the king had gone away and the 2 young men were left alone, Qamr al-Zaman told his story from beginning to end to Marzawan, who said, In very sooth, I know her with whom thou didst foregather. Her name is the Princess Budur, and she is daughter to King Ghayur. Then he related to him all that had passed with the princess from first to last, and acquainted him with the excessive love she bore him, saying, All that befell thee with thy father hath befallen her with hers, and thou art without doubt her beloved, even as she is thine. So brace up thy resolution, and take heart, for I will bring thee to her, and unite you both anon, and deal with you even as saith the poet, Albe to lover adverse be his love, and show aversion howso may he care, yet I will manage that their persons meet, e'en as the pivot of a scissor pair. And he ceased not to comfort and solace and encourage Qamr al-Zaman, and urge him to eat and drink till he ate food and drank wine, and life returned to him, and he was saved from his ill ease. And Marzawan cheered him and diverted him with talk and songs and stories, and in good time he became free of his disorder, and stood up and sought to go to the hammam. So Marzawan took him by the hand, and both went to the bath, where they washed their bodies and made them clean. And his father, in his joy at this event, freed the prisoners, and presented splendid dresses to his grandees, and bestowed large alm-gifts upon the poor, and bade decorate the city 7 days. Then quoth Marzawan to Qamr al-Zaman, Know, O my lord, that I came not from the Lady Budur save for this purpose, and the object of my journey was to deliver her from her present case, and it remaineth for us only to devise how we may get to her, since thy father cannot brook the thought of parting from thee. So it is my counsel that tomorrow thou ask his leave to go abroad hunting. Then do thou take with thee a pair of saddlebags full of money, and mount a swift steed, and lead a spare horse, and I will do the like, and say to thy sire, I have a mind to divert myself with hunting the desert, and to see the open country, and there to pass 1 night. Suffer not any servant to follow us, for as soon as we reach the open country, we will go our ways. Qamr al-Zaman rejoiced in this plan with great joy, and cried, It is good! Then he stiffened his back, and, going in to his father, sought his leave, and spoke as he had been taught, and the king consented to his going forth a-hunting, and said,
O my son, blessed be the day that restoreth thee to health. I will not gainsay thee in this, but pass not more than 1 night in the desert, and return to me on the morrow. For thou knowest that life is not good to me without thee, and indeed I can hardly believe thee to be wholly recovered from what thou hadst, because thou art to me as he of whom quoth the poet, Albe by me I had through day and night Solomon's carpet and the Khosrow's might. Both were in value less than wing of gnat, unless these eyne could hold thee I in sight.
Then the king equipped his son Qamr al-Zaman and Marzawan for the excursion, bidding make ready for them 4 horses, together with a dromedary to carry the money, and a camel to bear the water and belly timber. And Qamr al-Zaman forbade any of his attendants to follow him. His father farewelled him and pressed him to his breast and kissed him, saying,
I ask thee in the name of Allah, be not absent from me more than one night, wherein sleep will be unlawful to me, for I am even as saith the poet, Thou present in the heaven of heavens I dwell, bearing thine absence is of hell's my hell. Pledged be for thee my soul, if love for thee be crime, my crime is of the fellest fell. Does love low burn thy heart as burns it mine, doomed night and day Gehenna fire to smell?
Answered Qamr al-Zaman, O my father, inshallah I will lie abroad but one night. Then he took leave of him, and he and Marzawan mounted, and leading the spare horses, the dromedary with the money, and the camel with the water and victual, turned their faces towards the open country. And they travelled from the first of the day till nightfall, when they halted and ate and drank and fed their beasts and rested a while. After which they again took horse and ceased not journeying for 3 days, and on the 4th they came to a spacious tract wherein was a thicket. They alighted in it, and Marzawan, taking the camel and one of the horses, slaughtered them and cut off their flesh and stripped their bones. Then he doffed from Qamr al-Zaman his shirt and trousers, which he smeared with the horse's blood, and he took the prince's coat, which he tore to shreds and befouled with gore, and he cast them down in the fork of the road. Then they ate and drank, and mounting, set forward again. And when Qamr al-Zaman asked why this was done, and said, What is this, O my brother, and how shall it profit us? Marzawan replied, Know that thy father, when we have outstayed the 2nd night after the night for which we had his leave, and yet we return not, will mount and follow in our track till he come hither. And when he happeneth upon this blood which I have spilt, and he seeth thy shirt and trousers rent and gore-fouled, he will fancy that some accident befell thee from bandits or wild beasts. So he will give up hope of thee and return to his city, and by this device we shall win our wishes. Quoth Qamr al-Zaman, By Allah, this be indeed a rare device. Thou hast done right well. Then the two fared on for days and nights, and all that while Qamr al-Zaman did naught but complain when he found himself alone, and he ceased not weeping till they drew near the journey's end, when he rejoiced and repeated these verses. Wilt tyrant play with truest friend who thinks of thee each hour, and after showing love desire betray indifference? May I forfeit every favour if in love I falsed thee. If thee I left, abandon me by way of recompense. But I've been guilty of no crime such harshness to deserve, and if I aught offended thee, I bring my penitence. Of fortune's wonders, one it is thou hast abandoned me, but fortune never wearieth of showing wonderments. When he had made an end of his verses, Marzawan said to him, Look, these be King Ghayur's islands. Whereat Qamr al-Zaman joyed with exceeding joy, and thanked him for what he had done, and kissed him between the eyes, and strained him to his bosom. And after reaching the islands and entering the city, they took up their lodging in a khan, where they rested 3 days from the fatigues of their wayfare, after which Marzawan carried Qamr al-Zaman to the bath, and, clothing him in merchant's gear, provided him with a geomantic tablet of gold, with a set of astrological instruments, and with an astrolabe of silver, plated with gold. Then he said to him, Arise, O my lord, and take thy stand under the walls of the king's palace, and cry out, I am the ready reckoner, I am the scrivener, I am he who weeteth the sought and the seeker, I am the finished man of science, I am the astrologer accomplished in experience. Where then is he that seeketh? As soon as the king heareth this, he will send after thee and carry thee into his daughter the Princess Budur, thy lover. But when about going into her, do thou say to him, Grant me 3 days' delay, and if she recover, give her to me to wife, and if not, deal with me as thou dealtest with those who forewent me. He will assuredly agree to this, so as soon as thou art alone with her, discover thyself to her, and when she seeth thee, she will recover strength, and her madness will cease from her, and she will be made whole in 1 night. Then do thou give her to eat and drink, and her father, rejoicing in her recovery, will marry thee to her, and share his kingdom with thee, for he hath imposed on himself this condition, and so peace be upon thee. Now, when Qamr al-Zaman heard these words, he exclaimed, May I never lack thy benefits! And, taking the set of instruments aforesaid, sallied forth from the caravanserai in the dress of his order. He walked on till he stood under the walls of King Ghayur's palace, where he began to cry out, saying, I am the scribe, I am the ready reckoner, I am he who knoweth the sought and the seeker, I am he who openeth the volume and summeth up the sums, who dreams can expound whereby the sought is found. Where then is the seeker? Now when the city people heard this, they flocked to him, for it was long since they had seen scribe or astrologer, and they stood round him, and looking upon him, they saw one in the prime of beauty and grace and perfect elegance, and they marvelled at his loveliness, and his fine stature and symmetry. Presently one of them accosted him, and said,
Allah upon thee, O fair and young, with the eloquent tongue, incur not this affray, nor throw thy life away in thine ambition to marry the Princess Budur. Only cast thine eyes upon yonder heads hung up. All their owners have lost their lives in this same venture.
Yet Qamr al-Zaman paid no heed to them, but cried out at the top of his voice, saying, I am the doctor, the scrivener, I am the astrologer, the calculator. And all the townsfolk forbade him from this, but he regarded them not at all, saying in his mind, None knoweth desire save whoso suffereth it. Then he began again to cry his loudest, shouting, I am the scrivener, I am the astrologer. Thereupon all the townsfolk were wroth with him, and said to him,
Thou art nothing but an imbecile, silly self-willed lad. Have pity on thine own youth and tender years and beauty and loveliness.
But he cried all the more, I am the astrologer, I am the calculator, is there any one that seeketh? As he was thus crying, and the people forbidding him, behold, King Ghayur heard his voice and the clamour of the lieges, and said to his wazir, Go down and bring me yon astrologer. So the wazir went down in haste, and taking Qamr al-Zaman from the midst of the crowd, led him up to the king. And when in the presence, he kissed the ground, and began versifying, 8 glories meet, all conjoined in thee, whereby may fortune I thy servant be. Lair, lordliness, grace, generosity, plain words, deep meaning, honour, victory. When the king looked upon him, he seated him by his side, and said to him, By Allah, O my son, an thou be not an astrologer, venture not thy life nor comply with my condition. For I have bound myself that whoso goeth in to my daughter and healeth her not of that which hath befallen her, I will strike off his head. But whoso healeth her, him I will marry to her. So let not thy beauty and loveliness delude thee, for by Allah, and again by Allah, if thou cure her not, I will assuredly cut off thy head. And Qamr al-Zaman replied, This is thy right, and I consent, for I wot of this ere came I hither. Then King Ghayur took the Qazis to witness against him, and delivered him to the eunuch, saying, Carry this one to the Lady Budur. So the eunuch took him by the hand, and led him along the passage, but Qamr al-Zaman outstripped him, and pushed on before, whilst the eunuch ran after him, saying, Woe to thee! Hasten not to thine own ruin! Never yet saw I astrologer so eager for his proper destruction, but thou weetest not what calamities are before thee. Thereupon Qamr al-Zaman turned away his face from the eunuch, and began repeating these couplets. A sage, I feel a fool before thy charms. Distraught, I wot not what the words I say. If say I sun, away thou dost not pass from eyes of me, while suns go down with day. Thou hast completed beauty, in whose praise speech-makers fail, and talkers lose their way. Then the eunuch stationed Qamr al-Zaman behind the curtain of the princess's door, and the prince said to him, Which of the 2 ways will please thee more? Treat and cure thy lady from here, or go in and heal her from within the curtain? The eunuch marvelled at his words, and answered, An thou heal her from here, it were better proof of thy skill. Upon this Qamr al-Zaman sat down behind the curtain, and, taking out ink-case, pen, and paper, wrote the following. This is the writ of one whom passion swayeth, and whom longing waylayeth, and wakeful misery slayeth. One who despaireth of living, and looketh for naught but dying, with whose mourning heart nor comforter nor helper taketh part. One whose sleepless eyes none succoureth from anxieties, whose day is passed in fire, and his night in torturing desire, whose body is wasted for much emaciation, and no messenger from his beloved bringeth him consolation. And after this he indited the following couplets. I write with heart devoted to thy thought, and eyelids chafed by tears of blood they bled, and body clad by loving pine and pain, in shirt of leanness and worn down to thread. To thee complain I of love's tormentry, which ousted hapless patience from her stead. A toi, show favour and some mercy deign,
for passion's cruel hands my vitals shred.
And beneath his lines he wrote these cadenced sentences.
The heart's pain is removed by union with the beloved, and whomso his lover paineth, only Allah assaineth. If we or you have wrought deceit, may the deceiver win defeat. There is naught goodlier than a lover who keeps faith with the beloved who works him scathe.
Then, by way of subscription, he wrote,
From the distracted and despairing man, whom love and longing trepan, from the lover under passion's ban, the prisoner of transport and distraction, from this Qamr al-Zaman, son of Shahriman, to the peerless one, of the fair Houris the pearl union, to the Lady Budur, daughter of King Ghayur. Know thou that by night I am sleepless, and by day in distress, consumed with increasing wasting and pain, and longing and love unfain, abounding in sighs, with tear-flooded eyes, by passion captive ta'en, of desire the slain, with heart seared by the parting of us twain, the debtor of longing bane, of sickness cup companion. I am the sleepless one, who never closeth eye, the slave of love, whose tears run never dry, for the fire of my heart is still burning, and never hidden is the flame of my yearning.
Then on the margin Qamr al-Zaman wrote this admired verse.
Salam from graces hoarded by my Lord, to her who holds my heart and soul in hoard.
And also these.
Pray ye grant me some words from your lips, belike, such mercy may comfort and cool these eyne. From the stress of my love and my pine for you, I make light of what makes me despised, in thine. Allah guard a folk whose abode was far, and whose secret I kept in the holiest shrine. Now fortune in kindness hath favoured me, thrown on threshold dust of this love of mine. By me bedded I looked on Budour, whose sun the moon of my fortunes hath made to shine.
Then, having affixed his seal to the missive, he wrote these couplets in place of address.
Ask of my writ what wrote my pen in dole, and hear my tale of misery from this scroll. My hand is writing while my tears down flow, and to the paper plains my longing soul. My tears cease not to roll upon this sheet, and if they stopped I'd cause blood gouts to roll.
And at the end he added this other verse.
I've sent the ring from off thy finger bore, I, when we met, now deign my ring restore.
Then Qamr al-Zaman set the Lady Budur's ring inside the letter and sealed it and gave it to the eunuch, who took it and went in with it to his mistress. And when the Lady Budur opened it, she found therein her own very ring. Then she read the paper, and when she understood its purport and knew that it was from her beloved, and that he in person stood behind the curtain, her reason began to fly, and her breast swelled for joy and rose high, and she repeated these couplets.
Long, long have I bewailed the severance of our loves, with tears that from my lids streamed down like burning rain, and vowed that, if the days deign reunite us two, my lips should never speak of severance again. Joy hath o'erwhelmed me, so that, for the very stress of that which gladdens me, to weeping I am fain. Tears are become to you a habit, O my eyes, so that ye weep as well for gladness as for pain.
And having finished her verse, the Lady Budur stood up forthwith, and, firmly setting her feet to the wall, strained with all her might upon the collar of iron, till she brake it from her neck and snapped the chains. Then, going forth from behind the curtain, she threw herself on Qamr al-Zaman and kissed him on the mouth, like a pigeon feeding its young. And she embraced him with all the stress of her love and longing, and said to him, O my lord, do I wake or sleep? And hath the Almighty indeed vouchsafed us reunion after disunion?
Laud be to Allah, who hath our loves repaired, even after we despaired." Now when the eunuch saw her in this case, he went off running to King Ghayur, and, kissing the ground before him, said, "O my lord, know that this astrologer is indeed the sheikh of all astrologers, who are fools to him, all of them. For verily he hath cured thy daughter while standing behind the curtain, and without going into her." Quoth the king, "Look well to it, is this news true?" Answered the eunuch, "O my lord, rise and come see for thyself how she hath found strength to break the iron chains, and is come forth to the astrologer, kissing and embracing him." Thereupon the king arose and went in to his daughter, who, when she saw him, stood up in haste and covered her head, and recited these 2 couplets. "The toothstick I love not, for when I say siwak, I miss thee, for it sounds siwaka. The caper tree I love, for when I say arak, it sounds I look on thee, araka." Thereupon the king was so transported for joy at her recovery that he felt like to fly, and kissed her between the eyes, for he loved her with dearest love. Then, turning to Qamr al-Zaman, he asked him who he was, and said, "What countryman art thou?" So the prince told him his name and rank, and informed him that he was the son of King Shahriman, and presently related to him the whole story from beginning to end, and acquainted him with what happened between himself and the Lady Budur, and how he had taken her seal ring from her finger and had placed it on his own, whereat Ghayur marvelled and said, "Verily your story deserveth in books to be chronicled, and when you are dead and gone, age after age to be read." Then he summoned qazis and witnesses forthright, and married the Lady Budur to Prince Qamr al-Zaman, after which he bade decorate the city 7 days long. So they spread the tables with all manner of meats, whilst the drums beat and the criers announced the glad tidings, and all the troops donned their richest clothes, and they illuminated the city and held high festival. Then Qamr al-Zaman went in to the Lady Budur, and the king rejoiced in her recovery and in her marriage, and praised Allah for that he had made her to fall in love with a goodly youth of the sons of kings. So they unveiled her and displayed the bride before the bridegroom, and both were the living likeness of each other in beauty and comeliness and grace and love allurement. Then Qamr al-Zaman lay with her that night and took his will of her, whilst she in like manner fulfilled her desire of him and enjoyed his charms and grace. And they slept in each other's arms till the morning. On the morrow, the king made a wedding feast, to which he gathered all comers from the islands of the inner and outer seas. And he spread the tables with choicest viands, nor ceased the banqueting for a whole month. Now when Qamr al-Zaman had thus fulfilled his will and attained his inmost desire, and when as he had tarried a while with the Princess Budur, he bethought of him his father, King Shahriman, and saw him in a dream, saying,
"O my son, is it thus thou dealest with me?"
And reciting in the vision these 2 couplets,
"Indeed to watch the darkness moon he blighted me, and to stargaze through longsome night he plighted me. Easy, my heart, for haply he'll unite with thee, and patience, sprite, with whatso ills he dight to thee."
Now, after seeing his father in the dream and hearing his reproaches, Qamr al-Zaman awoke in the morning, afflicted and troubled, whereupon the Lady Budur questioned him, and he told her what he had seen. Thereupon she and he went into her sire, and, telling him what had passed, besought his leave to travel. He gave the prince the permission he sought, but the princess said, "O my father, I cannot bear to be parted from him." Quoth Ghayur, her sire, "Then go thou with him," and gave her leave to be absent a whole 12-month, and afterwards to visit him in every year once. So she kissed his hand, and Qamr al-Zaman did the like. Thereupon King Ghayur proceeded to equip his daughter and her bridegroom for the journey, and furnished them with an outfit and appointments for the march, and brought out of his stables horses marked with his own brand, blood dromedaries which can journey 10 days without water, and prepared a litter for his daughter, besides loading mules and camels with victual. Moreover, he gave them slaves and eunuchs to serve them, and all manner of travelling gear, and on the day of departure, when King Ghayur took leave of Qamr al-Zaman, he bestowed on him 10 splendid suits of cloth of gold embroidered with stones of price, together with 10 riding horses and 10 she-camels, and a treasury of money, and he charged him to love and cherish his daughter, the Lady Budur. Then the king accompanied them to the farthest limits of his islands, where, going in to his daughter Budour in the litter,
he kissed her and strained her to his bosom, weeping and repeating, "O thou who wooest severance, easy fare, for love embrace belongs to lover friend. Fare softly, fortune's nature falsehood is, and parting shall love's every meeting end." Then, leaving his daughter, he went to her husband and bade him farewell and kissed him, after which he parted from them, and, giving the order for the march, he returned to his capital with his troops. The prince and princess and their suite fared on without stopping through the first day and the second and the third and the fourth, nor did they cease faring for a whole month till they came to a spacious champaign, abounding in pasturage, where they pitched their tents. And they ate and drank and rested, and the Princess Budur lay down to sleep. Presently, Kamar al-Zaman went into her and found her lying asleep, clad in a shift of apricot-coloured silk that showed all and everything, and on her head was a coif of gold cloth embroidered with pearls and jewels. The breeze raised her shift, which laid bare her navel and showed her breasts, and displayed a stomach whiter than snow, each one of whose dimples would contain an ounce of benzoin ointment. At this sight, his love and longing redoubled, and he began reciting, "And were it asked me when by hellfire burnt, when flames of heart my vitals hold and hem, which wouldst thou choose, say, wouldst thou rather them, or drink sweet cooling draught? I'd answer, them!" Then he put his hand to the band of her petticoat trousers, and drew it and loosed it, for his soul lusted after her, when he saw a jewel, red as dye wood, made fast to the band. He untied it and examined it, and, seeing 2 lines of writing graven thereon in a character not to be read, marvelled and said in his mind, "Were not this bezel something to her very dear, she had not bound it to her trousers band, nor hidden it in the most privy and precious place about her person, that she might not be parted from it. Would I knew what she doth with this, and what is the secret that is in it." So saying, he took it and went outside the tent to look at it in the light, and while he was holding it, behold, a bird swooped down on him, and, snatching the same from his hand, flew off with it, and then lighted on the ground. Thereupon Kamar al-Zaman, fearing to lose the jewel, ran after the bird. But it flew on before him, keeping just out of his reach, and ceased not to draw him on from dale to dale and from hill to hill, till the night starkened and the firmament darkened, when it roosted on a high tree. So Kamar al-Zaman stopped under the tree, confounded in thought, and faint for famine and fatigue, and giving himself up for lost, would have turned back, but knew not the way whereby he came, for that darkness had overtaken him. Then he exclaimed, "There is no majesty and there is no might, save in Allah, the glorious, the great!" And laying him down under the tree, whereon was the bird, slept till the morning, when he awoke and saw the bird also wake up and fly away. He arose and walked after it, and it flew on little by little before him, after the measure of his faring, at which he smiled and said, "By Allah, a strange thing! Yesterday this bird flew before me as fast as I could run, and today, knowing that I have awoke tired and cannot run, he flieth after the measure of my faring. By Allah, this is wonderful! But I must needs follow this bird, whether it lead me to death or to life, and I will go wherever it goeth, for at all events it will not abide save in some inhabited land." So he continued to follow the bird, which roosted every night upon a tree, and he ceased not pursuing it for a space of 10 days, feeding on the fruits of the earth and drinking of its waters. At the end of this time he came in sight of an inhabited city, whereupon the bird darted off like the glance of the eye, and, entering the town, disappeared from Kamar al-Zaman, who knew not what it meant or whither it was gone. So he marvelled at this, and exclaimed, "Praise be to Allah, who hath brought me in safety to this city." Then he sat down by a stream, and washed his hands and feet and face, and rested a while, and, recalling his late easy and pleasant life of union with his beloved, and contrasting it with his present plight of trouble and fatigue and distress and strangerhood and famine and severance, the tears streamed from his eyes, and he began repeating these cinquains. "Fain had I hid thy handiwork, but it showed, changed sleep for wake, and wake with me abode. When thou didst spurn my heart, I cried aloud, Fate, hold thy hand, and ceased to gird and goad. In dole and danger, my sprite I spy. And but the Lord of love were just to me, Sleep from my eyelids ne'er were forced to flee. Pity, my lady, one for love o' thee, from his tribe's darling brought to low degree. Love came and doomed wealth beggar death to die. The railers chide at thee, I ne'er gainsay, but stop my ears and dumbly sign them nay. Thou lov'st a slender May, say they, I say, I've picked her out and cast the rest away. Enough, when fate descends she blinds man's eye. And as soon as he had finished his poetry and had taken his rest, he rose and walked on little by little, till he entered the city, not knowing whither he should wend. He crossed the city from end to end, entering by the land gate, and ceased not faring on till he came out at the sea gate, for the city stood on the seashore. Yet he met not a single one of its citizens. And after issuing from the land gate, he fared forwards, and ceased not faring till he found himself among the orchards and gardens of the palace, and passing among the trees presently came to a garden, and stopped before its door, whereupon the keeper came out to him and saluted him. The prince returned his greeting, and the gardener bade him welcome, saying, "Praised be Allah that thou hast come off safe from the dwellers of this city. Quick, come into the garth, ere any of the townsfolk see thee." Thereupon Qamr al-Zaman entered that garden, wondering in mind, and asked the keeper, "What may be the history of the people of this city, and who may they be?" The other answered, "Know that the people of this city are all Magians, but Allah upon thee, tell me how thou camest to this city, and what caused thy coming to our capital." Accordingly Qamr al-Zaman told the gardener all that had befallen him from beginning to end, whereat he marveled with great marvel, and said, "Know, O my son, that the cities of al-Islam lie far from us, and between us and them is a 4 months' voyage by sea and a whole 12 months' journey by land. We have a ship which saileth every year with merchandise to the nearest Moslem country, and which entereth the seas of the Ebony Islands, and thence maketh the Khalidan Islands the dominions of King Shahriman." Thereupon Qamr al-Zaman considered a while, and concluded that he could not do better than abide in the garden with the gardener and become his assistant, receiving for pay 1/4 of the produce. So he said to him, "Wilt thou take me into thy service, to help thee in this garden?" Answered the gardener, "To hear is to consent," and began teaching him to lead the water to the roots of the trees. So Qamr al-Zaman abode with him, watering the trees and hoeing up the weeds, and wearing a short blue frock which reached to his knees. And he wept floods of tears, for he had no rest day or night by reason of his strangerhood, and he ceased not to repeat these verses upon his beloved, amongst others the following couplets. "Ye promised us, and will ye not keep plight? Ye said a say, and shall not deed be dight? We wake for passion while ye slumber and sleep. Watchers and wakers claim not equal right. We vowed to keep our loves in secrecy, but spake the meddler, and you spoke forthright. O friend in pain and pleasure, joy and grief, in all case you only, claim my sprite. Mid folk is one who holds my prisoned heart. Would he but show some ruth for me to sight. Not every eye like mine is wounded sore, not every heart like mine love-pinings blight. Ye wronged me saying, love is wrongous, aye, yea, ye were right, events have proved that quite. Forget they one love-thralled, whose faith the world robs not, though burn the fires in heart alight. If on my foeman shall become my judge, whom shall I sue to remedy his despite? Had not I need of love, nor love had sought, my heart for sure were not thus love distraught." Such was the case with Qamr al-Zaman, but as regards his wife, the Lady Budur, when she awoke, she sought her husband and found him not. Then she saw her petticoat trousers undone, for the band had been loosened and the bezel lost, whereupon she said to herself, "By Allah, this is strange! Where is my husband? It would seem as if he had taken the talisman and gone away, knowing not the secret which is in it. Would to heaven I knew whither he can have wended! But it must needs have been some extraordinary matter that drew him away, for he cannot brook to leave me a moment. Allah curse the stone, and damn its hour!" Then she considered a while, and said in her mind, "If I go out and tell the varlets, and let them learn that my husband is lost, they will lust after me. There is no help for it but that I use a stratagem."
So she rose and donned some of her husband's clothes and riding boots, and a turban like his, drawing one corner of it across her face for a mouth veil. Then, setting a slave girl in her litter, she went forth from the tent and called to the pages who brought her Kamar al-Zaman's steed, and she mounted and bade them load the beasts and resume the march. So they bound on the burdens and departed, and she concealed her trick, none doubting but she was Kamar al-Zaman, for she favoured him in face and form. Nor did she cease journeying, she and her suite, days and nights, till they came in sight of a city overlooking the salt sea, where they pitched their tents without the walls and halted to rest. The princess asked the name of the town and was told,
"It is called the City of Ebony. Its king is named Armanus, and he hath a daughter, Hayat al-Nufus hight."
When the Lady Budur halted within sight of the Ebony City to take her rest, King Armanus sent a messenger to learn what king it was who had encamped without his capital. So the messenger, coming to the tents, made enquiry anent their king, and was told that she was a king's son who had lost the way being bound for the Khalidan Islands. Whereupon he returned to King Armanus with the tidings, and, when the king heard them, he straightway rode out with the lords of his land to greet the stranger on arrival. As he drew near the tents, the Lady Budur came to meet him on foot, whereupon the king alighted and they saluted each other. Then he took her to the city, and, bringing her up to the palace, bade them spread the tables and trays of food, and commanded them to transport her company and baggage to the guest-house. So they abode there 3 days, at the end of which time the king came in to the Lady Budur. Now she had that day gone to the hammam, and her face shone as the moon at its full, a seduction to the world, and a rending of the veil of shame to mankind. And Armanus found her clad in a suit of silk, embroidered with gold and jewels. So he said to her,
"O my son, know that I am a very old man, decrepit withal, and Allah hath blessed me with no child save one daughter, who resembleth thee in beauty and grace, and I am now waxed unfit for the conduct of the state. She is thine, O my son, and, if this my land please thee, and thou be willing to abide and make thy home here, I will marry thee to her, and give thee my kingdom, and so be at rest."
When Princess Budur heard this, she bowed her head, and her forehead sweated for shame, and she said to herself, "How shall I do, and I a woman? If I refuse and depart from him, I cannot be safe but that haply he send after me troops to slay me, and if I consent, belike I shall be put to shame. I have lost my beloved Kamar al-Zaman, and know not what is become of him, nor can I escape from this scrape, save by holding my peace and consenting and abiding here, till Allah bring about what is to be." So she raised her head and made submission to King Armanus, saying, "Hearkening and obedience!" Whereat he rejoiced and bade the herald make proclamation throughout the Ebony Islands to hold high festival and decorate the houses. Then he assembled his chamberlains and nabobs and emirs and wazirs and his officers of state and the qazis of the city, and, formally abdicating his sultanate, endowed Budour therewith and invested her in all the vestments of royalty. The emirs and grandees went into her and did homage, nothing doubting but that she was a young man, and all who looked on her bepissed their bag trousers for the excess of her beauty and loveliness. Then, after the Lady Budur had been made sultan, and the drums had been beaten in announcement of the glad event, and she had been ceremoniously enthroned, King Armanus proceeded to equip his daughter Hayat al-Nufus for marriage, and in a few days they brought the Lady Budur into her, when they seemed as it were 2 moons risen at one time, or 2 suns in conjunction. So they entered the bridal chamber, and the doors were shut and the curtains let down upon them, after the attendants had lighted the wax candles and spread for them the carpet bed. When Budur found herself alone with the Princess Hayat al-Nufus, she called to mind her beloved Kamar al-Zaman, and grief was sore upon her. So she wept for his absence and estrangement, and she began repeating, "O ye who fled and left my heart in pain, Lolian, no breath of life is found within this frame of mine. I have an eye which e'er complains of wake, but lo, tears occupy it, would that wake content these eyne. After ye marched forth the lover bode behind. Question of him what pains your absence could design. But for the floods of tears mine eyelids rail and rain, my fires would flame on high and every land calcine. To Allah make I moan of loved ones lost, for I, who for my pine and pain no more shall pain and pine.
I never wronged them save that over love I nursed. But love departs us lovers into blessed and cursed. And when she had finished her repeating, the Lady Budur sat down beside the Princess Hayat al-Nufus and kissed her on the mouth, after which, rising abruptly, she made the minor ablution and betook herself to her devotions. Nor did she leave praying till Hayat al-Nufus fell asleep, when she slipped into bed and lay with her back to her till morning. And when the day had broke, the king and queen came in to their daughter and asked how she did, whereupon she told them what she had seen, and repeated to them the verses she had heard. Thus far concerning Hayat al-Nufus and her father. But as regards Queen Budur, she went forth and seated herself upon the royal throne, and all the emirs and captains and officers of state came up to her and wished her joy of the kingship, kissing the earth before her and calling down blessings upon her. And she accosted them with smiling face and clad them in robes of honor, augmenting the fiefs of the high officials and giving largesse to the levies, wherefore all the people loved her and offered up prayers for the long endurance of her reign, doubting not but that she was a man. And she ceased not sitting all day in the hall of audience, bidding and forbidding, dispensing justice, releasing prisoners and remitting the customs dues, till nightfall, when she withdrew to the apartment prepared for her. Here she found Hayat al-Nufus seated. So she sat down by her side, and, clapping her on the back, coaxed and caressed her and kissed her between the eyes, and fell to versifying in these couplets. What secret kept I, these my tears have told, and my waste body must my love unfold. Though hid my pine, my plight on parting day, to every envious eye my secret sold. O ye who broke up camp, you've left behind my spirit wearied and my heart a-cold. In my heart's core ye dwell, and now these eyne roll blood drops with the tears they whilom rolled. The absent will I ransom with my soul, all can my yearning for their sight behold. I have an eye whose babe, for love of thee, rejected sleep, nor hath its tears controlled. The foeman bids me patient bear his loss, ne'er may mine ears accept the ruth he doled. I tricked their deem of me, and won my wish, of Qamr al-Zaman's joys manifold. He joins all perfect gifts like none before, boasted such might and main no king of old. Seeing his gifts bin Zaida's largesse, forget we, and Muawiyah mildest souled. Were verse not feeble and or short the time, I had in laud of him used all of rhyme. Then Queen Budur stood up and wiped away her tears, and, making the lesser ablution, applied her to pray. Nor did she give over praying till drowsiness overcame the Lady Hayat al-Nufus, and she slept, whereupon the Lady Budur came and lay by her till the morning. At daybreak she arose and prayed the dawn prayer, and presently seated herself on the royal throne and passed the day in ordering and counter-ordering and giving laws and administering justice. This is how it fared with her. But as regards King Armanus, he went in to his daughter and asked her how she did. So she told him all that had befallen her and repeated to him the verses which Queen Budur had recited, adding, O my father, never saw I one more abounding in sound sense and modesty than my husband, save that he doth nothing but weep and sigh. He answered,
O my daughter, have patience with him yet this third night, and if he go not in unto thee, and do away thy maidenhead, we shall know how to proceed with him, and oust him from the throne, and banish him the country.
And on this wise he agreed with his daughter what course he would take, and night came on. Queen Budur arose from the throne of her kingdom, and betaking herself to the palace, entered the apartment prepared for her. There she found the wax candles lighted, and the Princess Hayat al-Nufus seated and awaiting her, whereupon she bethought of her husband, and what had betided them both of sorrow and severance in so short a space. She wept and sighed, and groaned groan upon groan, and began improvising these couplets. News of my love fill all the land, I swear, as suns on Gaza wold rain heat and glare. Speaketh his jest, but hard its sense to say, thus never cease to grow my cark and care. I hate fair patience, since I loved thee, ere sawest lover hate for love to bear. A glance that dealt love-sickness dealt me death. Glances are deadliest things with torments rare. He shook his love-locks down and bared his chin, whereby I spied his beauties dark and fair. My care, my cure are in his hands, and he, Who caused their dolour can their dole repair. His belt went daft for softness of his waist, his hips for envy to uprise forbear. His brow curl diademed is murky night, unveil it and lo, bright morn shows brightest light. When she had finished her versifying, she would have risen to pray, but lo and behold, Hayat al-Nufus caught her by the skirt and clung to her, saying, "O my lord, art thou not ashamed before my father, after all his favour, to neglect me at such a time as this?" When Queen Budur heard her words, she sat down in the same place and said, "O my beloved, what is this thou sayest?" She replied, "What I say is that I never saw any so proud of himself as thou. Is every fair one so disdainful? I say not this to incline thee to me, I say it only of fear for thee from King Armanus, because he purposeth, unless thou go in unto me this very night, and do away my maidenhead, to strip thee of the kingship on the morrow, and banish thee his kingdom. And peradventure his excessive anger may lead him to slay thee. But I, O my lord, have ruth on thee, and give thee fair warning, and it is thy right to wreck." Now when Queen Budur heard her speak these words, she bowed her head groundwards a while in sore perplexity, and said in herself, "If I refuse I'm lost, and if I obey I'm shamed. But I am now queen of all the Ebony Islands, and they are under my rule, nor shall I ever again meet my Qamr al-Zaman save in this place, for there is no way for him to his native land but through the Ebony Islands. Verily, I know not what to do in my present case, but I commit my care to Allah, who directeth all for the best, for I am no man that I should arise and open this virgin girl." Then quoth Queen Budur to Hayat al-Nufus, "O my beloved, that I have neglected thee and abstained from thee is in my own despite." And she told her whole story from beginning to end, and showed her person to her, saying, "I conjure thee by Allah to keep my counsel, for I have concealed my case only that Allah may reunite me with my beloved Qamr al-Zaman, and then, come what may." The princess heard her with extreme wonderment, and was moved to pity, and prayed Allah to reunite her with her beloved, saying, "Fear nothing, O my sister, but have patience till Allah bring to pass that which must come to pass." And she began repeating, "None but the men of worth a secret keep, with worthy men a secret's hidden deep. As in a room, so secrets lie with me, whose door is sealed, lock shut, and lost the key." And when Hayat al-Nufus had ended her verses, she said, "O my sister, verily the breasts of the noble and brave are secrets of the grave, and I will not discover thine." Then they toyed and embraced and kissed, and slept till near the muazzin's call to dawn prayer, when Hayat al-Nufus arose and took a pigeon poult, and cut its throat over her smock, and besmeared herself with its blood. Then she pulled off her petticoat trousers and cried aloud, whereupon her people hastened to her and raised the usual lullilooing and outcries of joy and gladness. Presently her mother came in to her and asked her how she did, and busied herself about her and abode with her till evening, whilst the Lady Budur arose with the dawn and repaired to the bath, and, after washing herself pure, proceeded to the hall of audience, where she sat down on her throne and dispensed justice among the folk. Now when King Armanus heard the loud cries of joy, he asked what was the matter, and was informed of the consummation of his daughter's marriage. Whereat he rejoiced, and his breast swelled with gladness, and he made a great marriage feast, whereof the merrymaking lasted a long time. Such was their case, but as regards King Shahriman, it was on this wise. After his son had fared forth to the chase accompanied by Marzawan, as before related, he tarried patiently awaiting their return at nightfall. But when his son did not appear, he passed a sleepless night, and the dark hours were longsome upon him. His restlessness was excessive, his excitement grew upon him, and he thought the morning would never dawn. And when day broke, he sat expecting his son, and waited till noon, but he came not, whereat his heart forbade separation, and was fired with fears for Qamr al-Zaman, and he cried,
"Alas, my son!"
And he wept till his clothes were drenched with tears, and repeated with a beating heart,
"Love's votaries I ceased not to oppose, till doomed to taste love's bitter and love's sweet. I drained his rigour cup to very dregs, self-humbled at its slaves' and freemen's feet. Fortune had sworn to part the loves of us, she kept her word how truly, well I weet.
And when he ended his verse, he wiped away his tears and bade his troops make ready for a march and prepare for a long expedition. So they all mounted and set forth, headed by the Sultan, whose heart burnt with grief and was fired with anxiety for his son Qamr al-Zaman, and they advanced by forced marches. Now the king had divided his host into 6 divisions, a right wing and a left wing, a vanguard and a rear guard, and bade them rendezvous for the morrow at the crossroads. Accordingly they separated and scoured the country all the rest of that day till night, and they marched through the night, and at noon of the ensuing day they joined company at the place where 4 roads met. But they knew not which the prince followed, till they saw the sign of torn clothes, and sighted shreds of flesh, and beheld blood still sprinkled by the way, and they noted every piece of the clothes and fragment of mangled flesh scattered on all sides. Now when King Shahriman saw this, he cried from his heart core a loud cry, saying,
"Alas, my son!"
and buffeted his face, and plucked his beard, and rent his raiment, doubting not but his son was dead. Then he gave himself up to excessive weeping and wailing, and the troops also wept for his weeping, all being assured that Prince Qamr al-Zaman had perished. They threw dust on their heads, and the night surprised them shedding tears, and lamenting till they were like to die. Then the king, with a heart on fire, and with burning sighs, spake these couplets.
Chide not the mourner for bemourning woe. Enough is yearning every ill to show. He weeps for stress of sorrow and of pain, and these to thee best evidence his low. Happy of whom love sickness swore that ne'er should cease his eyelids loving tears to flow. He mourns the loss of fairest, fullest moon, shining o'er all his peers in glorious glow. But death made drink a brimming cup what day he fared from natal country fain to go. His home left he, and went from us to grief, nor to his brethren could he say adieu. Yea, his loss wounded me with parting pangs, and separation cost me many a throe. He fared farewelling as he fared our eyes, when as his Lord vouchsafed him paradise.
And when King Shahriman had ended his verses, he returned with the troops to his capital, giving up his son for lost, and deeming that wild beasts or banditti had set upon him and torn him to pieces, and made proclamation that all in the Khalidan islands should don black in mourning for him. Moreover, he built in his memory a pavilion, naming it House of Lamentations, and on Mondays and Thursdays he devoted himself to the business of the state and ordering the affairs of his levies and lieges, and the rest of the week he was wont to spend in the House of Lamentations, mourning for his son and bewailing him with elegiac verses, of which the following are some.
My day of bliss is that when thou appearest. My day of bale is that whereon thou farest. Though through the night I quake in dread of death, union with thee is of all bliss the dearest.
And again he said,
My soul be sacrifice for one whose going afflicted hearts with sufferings sore and dread. Let joy her widowed term fulfill, for I, divorced joy, with the divorce thrice said.
Such was the case with King Shahriman, but as regards Queen Budur, daughter of King Ghayur, she abode as ruler in the Ebony Islands, whilst the folk would point to her with their fingers and say, Yonder is the son-in-law of King Amanus. And every night she lay with Hayat al-Nufus, to whom she lamented her desolate state and longing for her husband Qamr al-Zaman, weeping and describing to her his beauty and loveliness, and yearning to enjoy him though but in a dream. And at times she would repeat, Well Allah wots that since my severance from thee, I wept till forced to borrow tears at usury. Patience, my blamer cried, heart sees right soon shalt see. Quoth I, say, blamer, where may home of patience be? This is how it fared with Queen Budur, but as regards Qamr al-Zaman, he abode with the gardener in the garden for no short time, weeping night and day and repeating verses bewailing the past time of enjoyment and delight. whilst the gardener kept comforting him and assuring him that the ship would set sail for the land of the Muslims at the end of the year. And in this condition he continued till one day he saw the folk crowding together and wondered at this. But the gardener came in to him and said,
O my son, give over work for this day, nor lead water to the trees, for it is a festival day, whereon folk visit one another. So take thy rest, and only keep thine eye on the garden, whilst I go look after the ship for thee, for yet but a little while, and I send thee to the land of the Moslems.
Upon this he went forth from the garden, leaving to himself Qamar al-Zaman, who fell to musing upon his case till his heart was like to break, and the tears streamed from his eyes. So he wept with excessive weeping till he swooned away, and, when he recovered, he rose and walked about the garden, pondering what time had done with him, and bewailing the long endurance of his estrangement and separation from those he loved. As he was thus absorbed in melancholy thought, his foot stumbled and he fell on his face, his forehead striking against the projecting root of a tree, and the blow cut it open, and his blood ran down and mingled with his tears. Then he rose, and, wiping away the blood, dried his tears and bound his brow with a piece of rag, then continued his walk about the garden, engrossed by sad reverie. Presently he looked up at a tree and saw two birds quarrelling thereon, and one of them rose up and smote the other with its beak on the neck, and severed from its body its head, wherewith it flew away, whilst the slain bird fell to the ground before Qamar al-Zaman. As it lay, behold, two great birds swooped down upon it alighting, one at the head and the other at the tail, and both drooped their wings and bowed their bills over it, and, extending their necks towards it, wept. Qamar al-Zaman also wept when seeing the birds thus bewail their mate, and called to mind his wife and father. Then he looked at the twain and saw them dig a grave and therein bury the slain bird, after which they flew away far into the firmament and disappeared for a while. But presently they returned with the murderer bird, and, alighting on the grave of the murdered, stamped on the slayer till they had done him to death. Then they rent his belly, and tearing out his entrails, poured the blood on the grave of the slain. Moreover, they stripped off his skin and tare his flesh in pieces, and, pulling out the rest of the bowels, scattered them hither and thither. All this while Qamar al-Zaman was watching them wonderingly, but presently, chancing to look at the place where the two birds had slain the third, he saw therein something gleaming. So he drew near to it and noted that it was the crop of the dead bird, whereupon he took it and opened it and found the talisman which had been the cause of his separation from his wife. But when he saw it and knew it, he fell to the ground a-fainting for joy, and, when he revived, he said, "Praised be Allah, this is a foretaste of good and a presage of reunion with my beloved." Then he examined the jewel and passed it over his eyes, after which he bound it to his forearm, rejoicing in coming weal, and walked about till nightfall awaiting the gardener's return. And when he came not, he lay down and slept in his wonted place. At daybreak he rose to his work, and, girding his middle with a cord of palm fibre, took hatchet and basket and walked down the length of the garden till he came to a carob tree, and struck the axe into its roots. The blow rang and resounded, so he cleared away the soil from the place and discovered a trap door, and raised it and found a winding stair, which he descended and came to an ancient vault of the time of Ad and Thamud, hewn out of the rock. Round the vault stood many brazen vessels of the bigness of a great oil jar, which he found full of gleaming red gold, whereupon he said to himself, "Verily, sorrow is gone and solace is come." Then he mounted from the souterrain to the garden, and, replacing the trapdoor as it was before, busied himself in conducting water to the trees till the last of the day, when the gardener came back and said to him,
"O my son, rejoice at the good tidings of a speedy return to thy native land. The merchants are ready equipped for the voyage, and the ship in 3 days' time will set sail for the city of Ebony, which is the first of the cities of the Moslems. And after making it, thou must travel by land a 6 months' march till thou come to the islands of Khalidan, the dominions of King Shahriman."
At this Qamar al-Zaman rejoiced and began repeating, "Part not from one whose wont is not to part from you, nor with your cruel taunts an innocent mortify. Another so long parted had ta'en heart from you, and had his whole condition changed, but not so I." Then he kissed the gardener's hand and said, "O my father, even as thou hast brought me glad tidings, so I also have great good news for thee. And told him anent his discovery of the vault, whereat the gardener rejoiced, and said, O my son, 80 years have I dwelt in this garden, and have never hit on aught, whilst thou, who hast not sojourned with me a year, hast discovered this thing. Wherefore it is heaven's gift to thee, which shall end thy crosses, and aid thee to rejoin thy folk, and foregather with her thou lovest. Quoth Kamar al-Zaman, There is no help, but it must be shared between me and thee. Then he carried him to the underground chamber, and showed him the gold, which was in 20 jars. He took 10, and the gardener 10, and the old man said to him, O my son, fill thyself leather bottles with the sparrow olives which grow in this garden, for they are not found except in our land, and the merchants carry them to all parts. Lay the gold in the bottles, and strew it over with olives, then stop them and cover them and take them with thee in the ship. So Kamar al-Zaman arose without stay or delay, and took 50 leather bottles, and stored in each somewhat of the gold, and closed each one after placing a layer of olives over the gold. And at the bottom of one of the bottles he laid the talisman. Then sat he down to talk with the gardener, confident of speedy reunion with his own people, and saying to himself, When I come to the Ebony Islands, I will journey thence to my father's country, and inquire for my beloved Budur. Would to heaven I knew whether she returned to her own land, or journeyed on to my father's country, or whether there befell her any accident by the way. And he began versifying, Love in my breast they lit and fared away, and far the land wherein my love is pent. Far lies the camp and those who camp therein, far is her tent shrine where I ne'er shall tent. Patience far fled me when from me they fled, sleep failed mine eyes, endurance was forspent. They left, and with them left my every joy, wending with them, nor find I peace that went. They made these eyes roll down love tears in flood, when pine and expectation but augment. In my heart's core their counterfeits I trace, with love and yearning to behold their grace. Then, while he awaited the end of the term of days, he told the gardener the tale of the birds and what had passed between them, whereat the hearer wondered, and they both lay down and slept till the morning. The gardener awoke sick, and abode thus 2 days, but on the 3rd day his sickness increased on him, till they despaired of his life, and Kamar al-Zaman grieved with sore grief for him. Meanwhile, behold, the master and his crew came and inquired for the gardener, and when Kamar al-Zaman told them that he was sick, they asked, Where be the youth who is minded to go with us to the Ebony Islands? He is your servant, and he standeth before you, answered the prince, and bade them carry the bottles of olives to the ship. So they transported them, saying, Make haste, thou, for the wind is fair. And he replied, I hear and obey. Then he carried his provant on board, and, returning to bid the gardener farewell, found him in the agonies of death. So he sat down at his head and closed his eyes, and his soul departed his body, whereupon he laid him out and committed him to the earth unto the mercy of Allah Almighty. Then he made for the ship, but found that she had already weighed anchor and set sail, nor did she cease to cleave the seas till she disappeared from his sight. So he went back to whence he came, heavy-hearted, with whirling head, and neither would he address a soul nor return a reply. And reaching the garden and sitting down in cark and care, he threw dust on his head and buffeted his cheeks. But anon he rented the place of its owner, and hired a man to help him in irrigating the trees. Moreover, he repaired the trap door, and he went to the underground chamber, and bringing the rest of the gold to grass, stored it in other 50 bottles, which he filled up with a layer of olives. Then he inquired of the ship, and they told him that it sailed but once a year, at which his trouble of mind redoubled, and he cried sore for that which had betided him, above all for the loss of the Princess Budur's talisman, and spent his nights and days weeping and repeating verses. Such was his case. But as regards the ship, she sailed with a favoring wind till she reached the Ebony Islands. Now, by decree of destiny, Queen Budur was sitting at a lattice window overlooking the sea, and saw the galley cast anchor upon the strand. At this sight, her heart throbbed, and she took horse with the chamberlains and nabobs, and, riding down to the shore, halted by the ship, whilst the sailors broke bulk and bore the bales to the storehouses. After which she called the captain to her presence, and asked what he had with him. He answered, O king, I have with me in this ship aromatic drugs and cosmetics and healing powders and ointments and plasters and precious metals and rich stuffs and rugs of Yemen leather, not to be borne of mule or camel, and all manner of attars and spices and perfumes, civet and ambergris and camphor and Sumatra aloes wood, and tamarinds and sparrow olives to boot, such as are rare to find in this country. When she heard talk of sparrow olives, her heart longed for them, and she said to the shipmaster, How much of olives hast thou? He replied, 50 bottles full, but their owner is not with us, so the king shall take what he will of them. Quoth she, Bring them ashore, that I may see them. Thereupon he called to the sailors, who brought her the 50 bottles, and she opened one, and, looking at the olives, said to the captain, I will take the whole 50, and pay you their value, whatso it be. He answered, By Allah, O my lord, they have no value in our country. Moreover, their shipper tarried behind us, and he is a poor man. Asked she, And what are they worth here? And he answered, 1,000 dirhams. I will take them at 1,000, she said, and bade them carry the 50 bottles to the palace. When it was night, she called for a bottle of olives and opened it, there being none in the room but herself and the Princess Hayat al-Nufus. Then, placing a dish before her, she turned it into the contents of the jar, when there fell out into the dish with the olives a heap of red gold. And she said to the lady Hayat al-Nufus, This is naught but gold. So she sent for the rest of the bottles and found them all full of precious metal and scarce enough olives to fill a single jar. Moreover, she sought among the gold and found therein the talisman, which she took and examined, and behold, it was that which Qamar al-Zaman had taken from off the band of her petticoat trousers. Thereupon she cried out for joy and slipped down in a swoon, and when she recovered she said to herself, Verily this talisman was the cause of my separation from my beloved Qamar al-Zaman, but now it is an omen of good. Then she showed it to Hayat al-Nufus and said to her, This was the cause of disunion, and now, please Allah, it shall be the cause of reunion. As soon as day dawned, she seated herself on the royal throne and sent for the shipmaster, who came into the presence and kissed the ground before her. Quoth she, Where didst thou leave the owner of these olives? Quoth he, O king of the age, we left him in the land of the Magians, and he is a gardener there. She rejoined, Except thou bring him to me, thou knowest not the harm which awaiteth thee and thy ship. Then she bade them seal up the magazines of the merchants, and said to them, Verily the owner of these olives hath borrowed of me, and I have a claim upon him for debt, and, unless ye bring him to me, I will without fail do you all die and seize your goods. So they went to the captain and promised him hire of the ship if he would go and return a second time, saying, Deliver us from this masterful tyrant. Accordingly the skipper embarked and set sail, and Allah decreed him a prosperous voyage, till he came to the island of the Magians, and, landing by night, went up to the garden. Now the night was long upon Qamar al-Zaman, and he sat, bethinking him of his beloved, and bewailing what had befallen him, and versifying, A night whose stars refused to run their course, a night of those which never seem outworn, like resurrection day of longsome length to him that watched and waited for the morn. Now at this moment the captain knocked at the garden gate, and Qamar al-Zaman opened and went out to him, whereupon the crew seized him and went down with him on board the ship, and set sail forthright. And they ceased not voyaging days and nights, whilst Qamar al-Zaman knew not why they dealt thus with him. But when he questioned them, they replied, Thou hast offended against the lord of the Ebony Islands, the son-in-law of King Armanus, and thou hast stolen his monies, miserable that thou art. Said he, By Allah, I never entered that country, nor do I know where it is. However, they fared on with him, till they made the Ebony Islands, and landing, carried him up to the Lady Budur, who knew him at sight, and said, Leave him with the eunuchs, that they may take him to the bath. Then she relieved the merchants of the embargo, and gave the captain a robe of honor worth 10,000 pieces of gold. And, after returning to the palace, she went in that night to the Princess Hayat al-Nufus, and told her what had passed, saying, Keep thou my counsel till I accomplish my purpose, and do a deed which shall be recorded and shall be read by kings and commoners after we be dead and gone. And when she gave orders that they bear Qamar al-Zaman to the bath, they did so, and clad him in a royal habit, so that, When he came forth, he resembled a willow bough or a star which shamed the greater and lesser light and its glow, and his life and soul returned to his frame. Then he repaired to the palace and went in to the Princess Budur, and when she saw him she schooled her heart to patience till she should have accomplished her purpose, and she bestowed on him Mamelukes and eunuchs, camels and mules. Moreover, she gave him a treasury of money, and she ceased not advancing him from dignity to dignity, till she made him Lord High Treasurer and committed to his charge all the treasures of the state. And she admitted him to familiar favor and acquainted the emirs with his rank and dignity. And all loved him, for Queen Budur did not cease day by day to increase his allowances. As for Qamr al-Zaman, he was at a loss anent the reason of her thus honoring him, and he gave gifts in largesse out of the abundance of the wealth, and he devoted himself to the service of King Armanus, so that the king and all the emirs and people, great and small, adored him and were wont to swear by his life. Nevertheless, he ever marveled at the honor and favor shown him by Queen Budur, and he said to himself, "By Allah, there needs must be a reason for this affection. Peradventure this king favoreth me not with these immoderate favors, save for some ill purpose, and, therefore, there is no help but that I crave leave of him to depart his realm." So he went in to Queen Budur and said to her, "O king, thou hast overwhelmed me with favors, but it will fulfill the measure of thy bounties if thou take from me all thou hast been pleased to bestow upon me, and permit me to depart." She smiled and asked, "What maketh thee seek to depart and plunge into new perils, whenas thou art in the enjoyment of the highest favor and greatest prosperity?" Answered Qamr al-Zaman, "O king, verily this favor, if there be no reason for it, is indeed a wonder of wonders, more by token that thou hast advanced me to dignities such as befit men of age and experience, albeit I am, as it were, a young child." And Queen Budur rejoined, "The reason is that I love thee for thine exceeding loveliness and thy surpassing beauty, and if thou wilt but grant me my desire of thy body, I will advance thee yet farther in honor and favor and largesse. And I will make thee wazir for all thy tender age, even as the folk made me sultan over them, and I no older than thou. So that nowadays there is nothing strange when children take the head, and by Allah he was a gifted man who said, 'It seems as though of Lot's tribe were our days, and crave with love to advance the young in years.'" When Qamr al-Zaman heard these words, he was abashed, and his cheeks flushed till they seemed aflame, and he said, "I need not these favors which lead to the commission of sin. I will live poor in wealth, but wealthy in virtue and honor." Quoth she, "I am not to be duped by thy scruples, arising from prudery and coquettish ways, and Allah bless him who saith, 'To him I spake of coupling, but he said to me, How long this noyous long persistency? But when gold piece I showed him, he cried, Who from the Almighty Sovereign e'er shall flee?'" Now when Qamr al-Zaman heard these words and understood her verses and their import, he said, "O king, I have not the habit of these doings, nor have I strength to bear these heavy burthens for which elder than I have proved unable. Then how will it be with my tender age?" But she smiled at his speech and retorted, "Indeed, it is a matter right marvellous how error springeth from the disorder of man's intendiment. Since thou art a boy, why standest thou in fear of sin, or the doing of things forbidden, seeing that thou art not yet come to years of canonical responsibility, and the offences of a child incur neither punishment nor reproof? Verily, thou hast committed thyself to a quibble for the sake of contention, and it is thy duty to bow before proposal of fruition. So henceforward cease from denial and coyness, for the commandment of Allah is a decree foreordained. Indeed, I have more reason than thou to fear falling and by sin to be misled, and well inspired was he who said, My prickle is big, and the little one said, Thrust boldly in vitals with lion-like stroke. Then I, 'Tis a sin, and he, No sin to me, so I had him at once with a counterfeit poke. When Qamr al-Zaman heard these words, the light became darkness in his sight, and he said, O king, thou hast in thy household fair women and female slaves who have not their like in this age. Shall not these suffice thee without me? Do thy will with them, and let me go. She replied, Thou sayest sooth, but it is not with them that one who loveth thee can heal himself of torment, and can abate his fever. For when tastes and inclinations are corrupted by vice, they hear and obey other than good advice. So leave arguing, and listen to what the poet saith. Seest not the bazaar with its fruit in rows? These men are for figs, and for sycamore those. And what another saith, many whose anklet rings are dumb have tinkling belts, and this hath all content, while that for want must wail. Thou bidst me a fool, and quit thee for her charms. Allah forfend I leave the faith, turn infidel. Nay, by thy rights of side-beard mocking all her curls, nor mot nor maid from thee my heart shall spell. And yet another, O beauty's union, love for thee's my creed, free choice of faith, and eke my best desire. Women I have forsworn for thee, so may deem me all men this day a shaveling friar. And yet another, even not beardless one with girl, nor heed the spy who saith to thee, 'tis an amiss. Far different is the girl whose feet one kisses, and that gazelle whose feet the earth must kiss. And yet another, a boy of twice 10 is fit for a king. And yet another, the penis smooth and round was made with anus best to match it. Had it been made for cunna's sake, it had been formed like hatchet. And yet another said, my soul thy sacrifice, I chose thee out, who art not menstruous nor oviparous. Did I with women mell, I should beget brats till the wide world grew straight for us. And yet another, she saith, sore hurt in sense the most acute, for she had proffered what did not besuit, unless thou stroke as man should swive his wife, blame not when horns thy brow shall incornute. Thy wand seems waxen, to a limpo grown, and more I palm it, softer grows the brute. And yet another, quoth she, for I to lie with her forbore, O folly following fool, O fool to core, if thou my coynte for kibla to thy coine reject, will show thee what shall please thee more. And yet another, she proffered me a tender coynte. Quoth I will not roger thee. She drew back, saying, from the faith he turns, who's turned by heaven's decree, and frontwise futtering, in one day, is obsolete persistency. Then swung she round and shining rump, like silvern lump she showed me. I cried, well done, O mistress mine, no more am I in pain for thee. O thou of all that Allah oped, showest me fairest victory. And yet another, men craving pardon will uplift their hands, women pray pardon with their legs on high. Out on it for a pious prayerful work, the Lord shall raise it in the depths to lie.
When Qamar al-Zaman heard her quote this poetry, and was certified that there was no escaping compliance with what willed she, he said, O King of the age, if thou must needs have it so, make covenant with me that thou wilt do this thing with me but once, though it avail not to correct thy depraved appetite, and that thou wilt never again require this thing of me to the end of time, so perchance shall Allah purge me of the sin. She replied, I promise thee this same, hoping that Allah of his favour will relent towards us and blot out our mortal offence. For the girdle of heaven's forgiveness is not indeed so strait, but it may compass us around and absolve us of the excess of our heinous sins, and bring us to the light of salvation out of the darkness of error, and indeed excellently well saith the poet, of evil thing the folk suspect us twain, and to this thought their hearts and souls are bent. Come, dear, let's justify and free their souls, that wrong us, one good bout, and then repent. Thereupon she made with him an agreement and a covenant, and swore a solemn oath by him who is self-existent, that this thing should befall betwixt them but once, and never again for all time, and that the desire of him was driving her to death and perdition. So he rose up with her on this condition, and went with her down to her own boudoir, that she might quench the low of her lust, saying, There is no majesty and there is no might, save in Allah, the glorious, the great. This is the fated decree of the all-powerful, the all-wise. And he doffed his bag trousers, shameful and abashed, with the tears running from his eyes for stress of affright. Thereat she smiled, and making him mount upon a couch with her, said to him,
After this night thou shalt see naught that will offend thee. Then she turned to him, bussing and bosoming him, and bending calf over calf, and said to him, Put thy hand between my thighs to the accustomed place, so haply it may stand up to prayer after prostration. He wept and cried, I am not good at aught of this. But she said, By my life, an thou do as I bid thee, it shall profit thee. So he put out his hand with vitals of fire for confusion, and found her thighs cooler than cream and softer than silk. The touching of them pleasured him, and he moved his hand hither and thither, till it came to a dome abounding in good gifts and movements and shifts, and he said in himself, Perhaps this king is a hermaphrodite, neither man nor woman quite. So he said to her, O king, I cannot find that thou hast a tool like the tools of men. What then moved thee to do this deed? Then loudly laughed Queen Budur till she fell on her back, and said, O my dearling, how quickly thou hast forgotten the nights we have lain together. Then she made herself known to him, and he knew her for his wife, the Lady Budur, daughter of King Ghayur, lord of the isles and the seas. So he embraced her, and she embraced him, and he kissed her, and she kissed him. Then they lay down on the bed of pleasure voluptuous, repeating the words of the poet. When his softly bending shape bid him close to my embrace, which clipped him all about like the tendrils of the vine, and shed a flood of softness on the hardness of his heart, he yielded, though at first he was minded to decline, and dreading lest the railer's eye should light upon his form, came armoured with caution to baffle his design. His waist makes moan of hinder cheeks that weigh upon his feet, like heavy load of merchandise upon young camel lion, girt with glances scimitar which seemed athirst for blood, and clad in mail of dusky curls that show the sheenest shine. His fragrance wafted happy news of footstep coming nigh, and to him like a bird uncaged I flew in straightest line. I spread my cheek upon his path beneath his sandal shoon, and lo, the stibium of their dust healed all my hurt of eyne. With one embrace again I bound the banner of our loves, and loosed the knot of my delight that bound in bonds malign. Then bade I make high festival, and straight came flocking in, pure joys that know not grizzled age, nor aught of pain and pine. The full moon dotted with the stars, the lips and pearly teeth, that dance right joyously upon the bubbling face of wine. So in the prayer niche of their joys I yielded me to what would make the humblest penitent of sinner most indign. I swear by all the signs of those glories in his face, I'll ne'er forget the chapter entitled Al-Ikhlas. Then Queen Budur told Qamar al-Zaman all that had befallen her from beginning to end, and he did likewise, after which he began to upbraid her, saying, What moved thee to deal with me as thou hast done this night? She replied, Pardon me, for I did this by way of jest, and that pleasure and gladness might be increased. And when dawned the morn and day arose with its sheen and shone, she sent to King Armanus, sire of the lady Hayat al-Nufus, and acquainted him with the truth of the case, and that she was wife to Qamar al-Zaman. Moreover, she told him their tale and the cause of their separation, and how his daughter was a virgin, pure as when she was born. He marvelled at their story with exceeding marvel, and bade them chronicle it in letters of gold. Then he turned to Qamar al-Zaman and said,
O king's son, art thou minded to become my son-in-law by marrying my daughter?
Replied he, I must consult the Queen Budur, as she hath a claim upon me for benefits without stint. And when he took counsel with her, she said, Right is thy recking. Marry her, and I will be her handmaid, for I am her debtor for kindness and favour and good offices, and obligations manifold, especially as we are here in her place, and as the king her father hath whelmed us with benefits. Now when he saw that she inclined to this, and was not jealous of Hayat al-Nufus, he agreed with her upon this matter, and told King Armanus what she had said, whereat he rejoiced with great joy. Then he went out, and, seating himself upon his chair of estate, assembled all the wazirs, emirs, chamberlains, and grandees, to whom he related the whole story of Qamar al-Zaman and his wife, Queen Budur, from first to last, and acquainted them with his desire to marry his daughter Hayat al-Nufus to the prince, and make him king in the stead of Queen Budur. Whereupon said they all, Since he is the husband of Queen Budur, who hath been our king till now, whilst we deemed her son-in-law to King Armanus, we are all content to have him to sultan over us, and we will be his servants, nor will we swerve from his allegiance." So Armanus rejoiced hereat, and, summoning qazis and witnesses and the chief officers of state, bade draw up the contract of marriage between Qamar al-Zaman and his daughter, the Princess Hayat al-Nufus. Then he held high festival, giving sumptuous marriage feasts and bestowing costly dresses of honor upon all the emirs and captains of the host. Moreover, he distributed alms to the poor and needy and set free all the prisoners. The whole world rejoiced in the coming of Qamar al-Zaman to the throne, blessing him and wishing him endurance of glory and prosperity, renown and felicity. And, as soon as he became king, he remitted the customs dues and released all men who remained in jail. Thus he abode a long while, ordering himself worthily towards his lieges, and he lived with his 2 wives in peace, happiness, constancy, and content, lying the night with each of them in turn, till there overtook them the destroyer of delights and the sunderer of societies, and Allah knoweth all things.